queen of my heart. Please don't deceive me when I tell you that just ain't the way it seems. Can you feel my love buzz? 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 When I tell you, you are the queen of my heart. Please don't deceive me when I tell you that just ain't the way it seems. Can you feel my love buzz? 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 You believe me when I tell you, you are the queen of my heart. Please don't deceive me when I tell you that just ain't the way it seems. Can you feel my love buzz? Can you feel my love buzz? Can you feel my love buzz? Can you feel my love buzz?
Oh my God, I want to take him home. We can put him in the truck.
We can put him in the truck.
We can put him in the truck.
Yeah, calm it down. Jen. Beep, beep.
No, shit, yo, what the wrong? Oh my God, are you okay? Hi, beep, beep. Hello. What are you eating, sir? You just had a full bath. Hey. Years ago. Tartaria. Where? Serious.
And I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. Hey, I will stand my ground, and I won't back down. Well, I know what's right. I got just one life in a world that keeps on pushing me around, but I stand my ground.
Obtained from a secret UAP craft retrieval program.
It was aliens.
Oh, my beloved ice cream bar. How I love to lick your creamy center. Pow!
women say they want a good man until they actually meet one and realize they're not equipped to handle him. A good man is not convenient. He doesn't bend to accommodate chaos. He doesn't rearrange his values because you're emotional.
A real good man has discipline, boundaries, and priorities that don't shift based on your mood.
And this is where women get confused. When you've never met emotional maturity, you misread everything.
You call him cold because he won't tolerate drama. You call him selfish because he protects his peace.
You label him detached because he refuses to beg for your approval. But that's not coldness. That is self-respect. A man who knows his worth doesn't move from insecurity.
Hello, hello. Good morning, my beauties and bees. Looks like the Hag of Detroit's pretty popular. I guess other people have heard of it. At least Patty Troy heard of it. True or not, the Detroit Hag story will always scare me. Maynard Saves is a Detroit native and says, Hag of Detroit, is this about my wife? I hope you're not married to the Hag of Detroit, but I don't know. You could be. But that's the topic for today's show. There's a few things I gotta go over before we get into that, though. Before we get into the polls. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is live from the Hive. It is March 28th. It is 8:38 a.m. here in the Mountain Time Zone in the beautiful land of enchantment in New Mexico, where I am currently residing. I'm drinking coffee because I was up late hanging out with Lil and Seth and Kelly, and we were talking about trauma and stuff. So yeah, I had a little trouble sleeping last night after that, which is silly, but you know, trauma's trauma. Speaking of trauma, there's some things that I just need to get to address. I'm not gonna like call any names or talk about anything specific, but there is a active I guess say campaign, bullying campaign, abuse campaign, whatever, trying to get me to stop being on the internet, to stop producing content, to either that or to because the people participating in this campaign it's kind of if she dies, that's fine too situation. They know I struggle with suicidal ideation. Because it comes with a lot of my mental illness stuff, but so, I mean, one way or the other, they're just trying to get me to go away. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving the internet. I've been doing this since 2020. I've been doing this for 6 years now. I'm on my 6th year of making YouTube content here, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm also not getting dragged into your drama, right? If I do address any kind of drama, it's going to be on a different channel. But regardless, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep doing the show about cryptids and ghosts and aliens and Tartaria and divination and alien crop circles and alternative timelines and stuff like that. I'm going to keep doing that because that's what I enjoy. That is what I'm here for. Is to have fun every Saturday morning, right, with you guys. I'm not trying to hurt anybody, not trying to cause anybody any stress. I am an actual person. I am a real person with real emotional feelings. I don't think I have done anything to deserve any of this abuse that's been cast at me, and just putting that out there. You're not going to make me go away. I'm going to keep doing my shows. I'm going to keep doing live from the Hive every Saturday morning, as I've done I've done live from the Hive for at least 5 years, every Saturday morning. And I've got a new show, 14 News, where I keep you all updated on what's going on in the world of weird, in the 14 world. Again, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, cryptids, interdimensional demons, all that stuff. On Thursday nights, I've been doing that show. So you can check that out too. Yes, I'm glad to see Dave, Captive Desk Dave, is here, because I was kind of getting worried about him. He's been MIA for a little bit, so good to see you, Dave. I'm happy that you are doing well and you are surviving. But just wanted to put that out there that, you know, this this is where I am right now. This is what I'm working against. I've got a lot of other stuff going on in my life. I'm going to be moving next month. At the end of next month, I'm going to be moving. My lease is up here, and we're moving out of this apartment. So I will be moving. I'm moving across town here. My roommates that I'm living with are moving to Pennsylvania, though. For some reason, they want to go where it's cold. I don't know why. I like the desert, but so they're going, and I'm staying here. So I got a lot going on. And you all know I work like 5 jobs to try to make ends meet, and I barely manage to do that with the 5 jobs I have because this economy sucks and nobody can afford to pay me to walk their dog or to check their mail and all that stuff. Yeah. So I'm a busy gal. I got a lot going on. I do not have time to deal with this like petty vendettas, right? Like I'm gonna put this down right now. If I see somebody being like misogynist or racist or transphobic, or I don't want that person in my community, right? They're done. That's it. And if you're buddy with that person, I don't want you in my community either, because that tells me that them being a bigot against me or anybody else is okay with you, and you're not welcome in my circles, in my spaces, because I don't think you're safe. That's going to be the end of it. If you're not safe, I don't want you here, because there are vulnerable people here. There are marginalized people here. There are gay, lesbian, trans, all sorts of queer people. There's two-spirit people here. So I don't need bullies in my side chat, right? All right. So let's get into it. So first things first, let's hit up the polls. So this week's polls for Weekend Weird, we had the brochure, which I'm sure I'm not saying that right, but when we cover it, I'll learn how to say it right. We had automatic writing, which is where you write messages from the ghost. Now, Seeing Stones and Black Mirrors was the winner. I put it in the title of the stream for a little bit, and now I had to switch it because Lost Trees of Tartaria took over. But this one was in the lead for most of the week, Lost Seeing Stones, which is great because I like, when it comes to divination, I think that scrying is the most effective, like the most raw. It's literal. You're manufacturing your own pareidolia. But we'll talk about that when we cover that topic. What we are talking about today is going to be Lost Trees of Tartaria. Look at the size of that tree stump. Is that a tree stump? We'll talk about it later in the show. You stick around, okay? And then for the Cryptic Corner, I think this is why everybody's here this morning. I had a hella turnout this morning compared to what I've been getting the last couple weeks since this whole community drama thing started. So I think that the Hag of Detroit, which won, is absolutely what's driving my audience to come here this morning. I'm here for it. You want more Hags of Detroit type stuff? We can bring it to you. Now, crop circles, there are the crop circle entities, I should say, did not get any votes this week. 16 people voted, and not a single one of them wanted to know about crop circles. Crop circles go way, way, way back, like the early days of agriculture. So this is not a new phenomenon like they try to make it out to be. And it's kind of an art form. So when we talk about that, we'll talk about it. The Brazilian ape was the new kid on the block. I figured I'd better go ahead and rehash this and show you exactly where these things are being seen and kind of explore what they are, what they could be. Because you know what, there's no apes in South America. Not really. Not that we know of. There'd be a hell of a. There need to be some kind of explanation for apes in South America. We got a vampire named Mercy, and she's in New England. And she was at this is an American vampire case. You want to hear about it? You got to vote for it. But of course, our winner was the Hag of Detroit. The Hag of Detroit. Now, I've heard a lot of people claim that they are the Hag of Detroit, including Kelly King, apparently Maynard's wife. But you know what? And before we can decide who is the Hag, we're going to have to find out what is the Hag. So we're going to do that right up next. Heck yeah. All right. So, oh, damn, that coffee went down the wrong pipe. That was rough. All right. I got that. Ooh. I'm still recovering. Give me a minute to recover. $40-mile tall trees. You bet your ass we're getting 40-mile tall trees. We're getting trees for days. Yeah. All right. I will. I'm going to punt things over to Cryptic Corner after this the musical stylings of Ben Shapiro.
Whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. I said certified freak. 7 days a week. Wet ass P word. Make that pullout game weak. Yeah.
Sorry that the audio was off on that one. We'll try that again. The musical stylings of Ben Shapiro.
Whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. There's some whores in this house. I said certified freak. 7 days a week. Wet ass P word. Make that pullout game weak. Yeah, you effin' with some wet ass P word. Bring a bucket and a mop for this wet ass P word. Give me everything you've got for this wet ass P word. Beat it up, N word, catch a charge. Extra large and extra hard. Put this P word right in your face. Swipe your nose like a credit card. Hop on top, I wanna ride. I do a kegel while it's inside. Spit in my mouth, look in my eyes. This P word is wet, come take a dive. It continues along these lines. And it gets significantly more vulgar. Like, a lot more vulgar.
All right, hello, my beauties and bees, and welcome once again to another installment of Cryptic Corner, where we explore the unexplained, the supernatural, the paranormal and hidden, the mysterious, the alien, the accursed, and the forbidden. All right, I'm your host, Miss Bumblebee. Thank you so much for joining us. Glad everybody's having a good weekend so far. Got a good turnout for the show. Everybody's doing good. Math Pig even says, life's good. Just heading out for lunch with a lady friend, LOL. Waiting for her to finish powdering her nose. I'm going to powder my nose now just because you said that. How's that look? Me and Math Pig were talking on the phone the other night. When I was out walking. And because of the way I do my makeup and the lighting, my nose was all you could see was the tip of my nose. And like, yeah, it was funny. And Math Pig's like, well, I can see your nose in the dark. Because it was dark. But yeah, I was out strolling around the neighborhood. And yeah, so it's good to see you. Good to see you, Robbie. 7 stars and 7 stones and 1 white tree. Are we talking about the flag of Gondor? Is it bad that I know what the flag of Gondor looks like? Oh, Cosmic Kyle's here. Oh my gosh, Cosmic Kyle's here for the Hag of Detroit too. Look, we are getting our hag on today. This is what won the poll, the Hag of Detroit. I'd never heard of this until this year. So, and I know I'm supposed to be your expert on all things 14 and supernatural and all that, but there's a lot of cities in this world, and all of them have something like this in them. So this is not the end of that. We got more of this to come. More of these local individual city ghost stories or cryptids. So some cities have a ghost, some have a cryptid, some have a UFO crash. You know, I'm close to Roswell, they have a UFO crash. I grew up in Hannibal, Missouri, where they have ghosts. Is their claim to fame, like Mark Twain era ghost. You know, I was right up the road from Louisiana, Missouri, where they had the Momo monster, right? And then there was cattle mutilations even further down by like Cape Girardeau. So all these little towns have all towns and cities have their own creepy crawlies, and big cities have more than one. And Detroit does have more than one. There's a lot of spooktacular stuff going on in Detroit that we could explore too. But the Hag of Detroit is a phenomenon that I did not know about. So I'm glad that I've found out about it here recently. I actually found out about it on a Facebook post. I'm like, oh, damn, I got to look that up. And I did. I found a good long video from the tape library about it. The tape library does, let's see, we'll read their description. Okay, the home of the strange, the scary, the paranormal, and unidentified. Sounds a lot like CrypticCorner. Welcome to the dark corner of the internet. A corner, maybe this is the other dark corner, because there are going to be 2 dark corners and 2 light corners, right? Like a political compass. This is the tape library. They've been around since 2018, so I can't even say, oh, I'm older than this people, because they're a couple years older than this channel. Technically, this channel's been around since 2015, but the first 5 years or so of it was crypto bugs, which was a completely different topic. We talked about exotic arthropods. And I showed off my collection, which I don't have anymore. I don't have my bugs anymore. I don't have a bug collection. The only pet bugs I have right now is Sweet Caroline, which is my black hole spider. And unfortunately, she's 3 years old, so she's hitting the end of her life. And then I got my blue death feeding beetles in the living room, which I'm actually thinking about giving to my future neighbor Robert if he wants to take care of him, just because he's I'm not in a place to be taking care of a lot of pets right now. A lot of little things that can't tell me when they're hungry and stuff. I'm just not in that kind of place right now, but I hopefully will be soon. And me and Samantha talked about getting some jumping spiders, so that's definitely something that could be coming up in the future as well. But the tape library. Okay, so this place. Let's look at their content real quick. God Isn't Here, The Place of Evil, Battle for Survival, Disturbing Cisco Grove Incident. Then we've got our Detroit Hag. A members-only version of the Detroit Hag. It's ads-free, but, you know, I don't get ads anyway. Don't Go Here. I think that's about Port Lock, Alaska. What did they see? Yorkshire Shadow Man. Oh my gosh, I could go on and on about shadow people. We need to add those to the polls too. Maybe Shadow Man, shadow people will be really, because we've done the Hat Man, and he is a shadow man, but he's like, why do you hate spiders? Wait, no. Oh, they're so cute though. Jumping spiders are so, they're like, they want uppies, and I love spiders. I agree, Granny. Detroit is awesome. Great history and buildings, etc. Yeah, so you kind of get the idea what the channel's about. You know, evil, haunted houses, and yeah, Port Lock, Alaska's. Oh, we got some haunted highways. Nice. All right. Let's. But we need to get into this horrifying hag, because she's supposed to be horrifying. Let's do it.
about to witness the very exciting story of a city and its people. It is a story of a city seeking new horizons in a resolute...
Keep them busy.
It's kind of an
They were
interesting.
seemed a little colder than usual. A couple he had known for years but hadn't seen for a while.
Story of a city seeking new horizons in a resolute contest with great challenges. That city is Detroit.
It was a long drive from Georgia to Detroit, but Shirley Patterson didn't mind. He was
I've been Robbie can attest to that. I've been trying to sell myself as a producer and stream designer for years. I actually there was a guy McKinnon Michaels. I can't. He was a video essayist, right? And he made the weakness of Kent Hovind was his video essay, and me and him became friends. And I started working on setting things up for him to do a Q&A and doing his visual production stuff and music and everything for him to do a live stream and regarding that. And it kind of like fizzled, and that was one of the biggest ones I did because that weakness of Kent Hovind thing kind of like popped off. So yeah, I have thrown my cards into the hat on that. Again, that's another thing. Like I was just talking to Robbie about Robbie a second ago, but yeah, Robbie also does the visual design stuff and all that. So me and him have both been scraping the bottom of the barrel, trying to see if anybody wants to purchase our services.
Excited.
The problem is everybody thinks they can do it themselves. That's why you got a lot of ugly ass channels out there. Not saying my channel is like freaking beautiful or anything, but I am, I do a decent job at visuals.
Go and visit his old friends, the Adamses. A couple he had known for years but hadn't seen for a while. They had recently rented a place up in Detroit, and Shirley was very keen to come and see it. Weirdly, when he spoke to them about it, they seemed a little colder than usual, like they weren't super excited about him coming up to them for a few days. But he thought they hadn't been in their new home for too long. Well, it had been nearly a year, but it takes time to settle sometimes, and the Adamses had plenty of children to keep them busy. They were likely tired.
Oh, because of the seeing stones, the Palantirs. Yes. Which I love the Palantirs. I hate how Tech Bro Chud people have like repurposed that word. I hate how much the right wing people are into Tolkien at all because they don't get it. It's like it's Lord of the Rings is an anti-war book. There's literally a entire chapter towards the end out of nowhere, and it really kind of blindsides you because you've been building up this hatred towards these people, towards the enemy, the dark enemy and his armies. And we see Sam Wise, Gamgee, sees one of the when the Rangers are fighting the Mameluke, the big elephant thing, sees one of the people falling off there, right? And the body lands right in front of him. And Sam has this whole huge internal dialogue with himself where he's like wondering if this, looking at the guy's body and wondering if he would rather be back home with his family, tending his garden, holding his kids, doing anything else but dying up here on these battle planes. So, like, people trying to these people trying to appropriate Tolkien into this pro fascism, pro crush your enemy kind of thing is not true. No, even the situation with the Easterlings and the Southrons and the Haradrim, all of those people, the place was made for them in the world.
Stressed. A visit from good old Shirley would do them some good, he thought to himself, as he drove along the streets of Detroit, the leaves falling around the pavements, as autumn was fully here. Bill and Lillian Adams greeted Shirley after he pulled onto their driveway. Bill rushed to grab his friend's suitcase as Shirley looked up at the house. It was a simple grey frame house. A little small maybe.
This kind of reminds me like the Hexam Heads too. Remember the Hexam Heads? Do we need to recover that? How long has it been since we did the Hexam Heads? I love the Hexam Heads. They're like one of my favorite. The Hexam Heads we did. Okay, it's not been that long ago. We did it about 3 years ago. What's the quality on it though? Let me look. I'm trying to review some of my top. No, it's good. Good quality. But yeah, I did the Hexam Heads like some years ago, 3 years ago, and it's still very much reminds me of that. Let me drop that link in the side chat. It's Hexham, right? Right? Yeah, that's correct.
Them and the kids, but it looked nice, Shirley thought. Lillian showed Shirley around and then took him through the kitchen to a small dark room at the back of the property. Despite the house not being that large, this room felt removed from the rest, tucked right back. It had a built.
I want you all to pay attention because what's happening right here is the story, and this is good storytelling too. Is it's priming you, right? It doesn't like the feel the room felt detached. There's no other features or anything given to it to make you give you the impression that it's detached. It felt detached. So we're appealing to this uncomfortable emotion that's kind of nebulous. It's very much what a lot of people will lean into in ghost hunting scenarios. Like, oh, I feel bad energy here. I feel a presence here. I feel like I'm being watched. Things like that. It's very much how you feel. It's not necessarily things that are physically happening. And that's why, ghost hunting will always be a thing. Paranormal investigation will always be a thing. Because as long as it's built on, I'm feeling these things, there's no debunking feelings, right? But priming, you can force feelings that aren't there. It happens to me all the time. I'm going to be releasing a short about that here in a little bit.
In wardrobe and was big enough to fit a bed, but that was about it. Shirley smiled at Lillian. "So, this will be my room then," he said. Lillian told him to get himself settled in. But he could tell something was off about Bill and Lillian. They didn't seem like their normal selves, and he couldn't put his finger on why. Bill Adams.
You can talk to me, Lillian. It's your boy Shirley. You can talk to me. What's going on? I don't know how they talk in Detroit. I assume they talk like Kelly.
Worked the midnight shift at a local Cadillac plant. So around 11:30 that night.
Did I get a hail from... I did. Hail, Hive signs, and hail the hag. Yeah. I missed that. Good. Don't misappropriate Tolkien and share the stream instead.
He headed off to work. It had been a long day, and Shirley said goodnight to Lillian before retiring to the guest room to get some much needed sleep. Shirley climbed into bed and rolled over to face the wall. He said it felt like he had only been laying there for a few minutes, but he could have easily fallen asleep with how tired he was.
This right here, when I still lived in Missouri, when I was a young tot, not a young tot, I was an adult. I actually had a kid at this time. Ian was a baby, and we were right across the hall from him too. But our master bedroom, I don't know if I primed my brain about it or what, but that's where I had all my first real haggings happen. Where I don't know if you know what a hag is, or being hag ridden. It's a form of sleep paralysis. Except for you sense a presence there that's trying to suffocate you. And that's called hagging, or the old hag. Now, my experience with my entity, with my sleep paralysis demon, she was a hag. So I'm basic. I don't get something fancy. A lot of people get like, oh, he was a purple elf that walked on the ceiling or something. Nope. I get the basic. I get just a little hag now. About, yay high, just high enough to be seen on the bed and put its arms its hands be on top of me. And it was all shaggy and hairy and gross, and musty, and it was a full sensory overload. It smelled like must and dirt. I could feel it pushing on my chest. I could hear it and its feet shuffling, especially like it was wearing wooden shoes or something. And then, yeah, and I couldn't. The one sensory thing that was the least acute was the visual, because it was just like a kind of a dark, vaguely hairy form standing there next to me, but it was kind of like Cousin It, but dirty. I've told this story a million times, and this thing has visited me throughout my life. Not a lot of times, maybe like it's like 8 times. But once I convinced myself, I went, the important thing to do when you're in sleep paralysis, because you're laying there, you're not able to move except for your eyes. But so you got to like kind of focus on things that you do know are there, and tell yourself it'll be over soon. That your body will wake up. And these early times when it was happening, it was actually, I was sleeping in that room with blackout curtains on the windows and stuff. So it was really dark in there. It was during the day because I was working overnights. But later hagging experiences I had, there's been people laying right next to me that I couldn't mess with. Yeah.
Suddenly, he felt someone grab him from behind, pulling on his side and flipping him over onto his back with such a sudden force it caused Shirley to jump up, terrified. At first he thought it was one of the kids messing around, but the strength. He didn't have long to play it over in his mind. There was no one else on his bed. No one that could have pulled him round like that. But
I've had, Octopus with No Friends says, I've had one hag experience. She was dark and cloaked and witchy, lingering in the closet at my ex's place. Well, that's, yeah, see, and that's the thing too, is that demonstrates these are thought forms. The fact that, like, that your experience with being with the hag and her sort of appearance was different than mine, and everybody's is going to be different. It's going to be what your mind constructs of what's creeping around in the dark there. My friend Amanda, when we were teenagers, used to get hagged by a nun, a big nun too, like a 8-foot tall nun. It was yeah, and this was before any of the nun stuff came out, the movies and stuff. This was back in the 90s. Or maybe early 2000s. Yeah, but anyway.
He wasn't alone. He was glancing around the darkened room, trying to figure out what had just happened, when he noticed the door to the bedroom was open. There was someone standing there in the kitchen. There were still lights on throughout the house, so it was being backlit by the kitchen light, creating just a darkened outline initially.
We'll just call it a silhouette, baby.
It was a woman. Lillian? What are you doing? Shirley called out. She had
It's not Lillian, it's the hag. It's the horrible hag of Detroit.
her back to him and didn't respond. Shirley called out again, but that's when his eyes began to adjust, and he slowly realised this didn't look like Lillian. He felt a shiver run down his spine as he began to process what he was looking at. The woman still had her back to him, but he began to notice she had longer hair than his friends. She also appeared to be wearing a short fur coat, and a blue dress was poking out to the bottom of it. Still, the figure didn't turn. It just looked outwards.
Just like fur coats in Detroit. Yeah. Because it gets cold there, that makes sense.
Into the kitchen.
Morning, Tori.
Shirley didn't question why this person had flipped him over, why she was ignoring him. His mind jumped straight to anger. There was an intruder in his friend's house.
Why does my brain associate Detroit with fur coats? Like, if I think it's like the streets of Detroit, I see a lot of people in my head wearing fur coats. If I think about a woman from Detroit, I automatically put her in a fur coat. I know it's because it's cold there, and I do that with other cities too. Like Chicago. I'll definitely put a woman in a fur coat in my head in Chicago.
Shirley shouted. The woman ignored him. He jumped out of bed and rushed towards her, screaming as loud as he could, seemingly in an effort to scare this woman away. But she didn't move, didn't react. He quickly took the few short steps from the bed to the doorway, but just as he was about to reach out for her, the kitchen light went out. In fact,
yeah, that's good. Yes. Darkness. Oh, that's a good I want to see this done in like a movie. That'd be kind of cool. I don't know why he's getting all worked up and shouting at her.
Every light in the house seemed to switch off simultaneously. Shirley Patterson was now unable to see, and this woman was there in the darkness with him. Shirley didn't know it at the time, but his friends had been using him as an unwitting test subject.
That's why you do this.
Something was very wrong with that bedroom. Something they couldn't explain.
You couldn't do that in the 60s, though.
It's time to get yourself a warm drink, dim the lights and get comfortable. I've got a chilling little paranormal case from the 1960s to share with you all. Something that, while ingrained in the local folklore of Detroit, seemingly isn't really spoken about too often in the wider world. This is the case of the horrible hag of Detroit. Welcome to the Tape Library. If you enjoy tales of the paranormal and the unexplained, I'm here every couple of weeks discussing famous cases.
And
First we hear the stories, then we try to
enjoy tales of the paranormal and unexplained. I'm here live every Saturday morning. Yeah. The only sleep paralysis incident I've had, it was a man, not a hag. Yeah, there's other shadow. The Hat Man is another popular sleep paralysis demon. Right? They're common. A gray alien is a common sleep paralysis demon. A Nord sort of person. There's been people seeing giant praying mantises even. So sleep paralysis demons come in all sorts of flavors.
Lay out what may have really happened. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future stories. Now, let's get into tonight's case. In the early 1960s, Detroit was at a crossroads. The city was still known as the motor capital of the world, a global symbol of manufacturing power, a place where factory shifts dictated daily life, and thousands of families relied on the automotive industry to survive. Radios were just beginning to carry the sounds of Motown. Assembly lines ran day and night, but many middle class...
Look how gross that smoke is. Ugh. Back when they had no regulations, this is before the Environmental Protection Act.
Plus families were beginning to flee for the suburbs, leaving the rhythm of working class life to shape the character of entire communities. Detroit was also entering a period of tension and transition. Economic pressure was growing, social unrest was building. Beneath the surface of productivity and progress, many residents felt an unspoken sense of uncertainty, the feeling that the city was approaching a turning point. And that darkness just bubbling underneath the surface can be seen echoed in the city's many ghost stories and mysteries. Of course, some existed long before this period of time, and stuck around long after. But when viewed through this lens, it is interesting. Our ghost stories really do represent the worlds we grow up in.
That's what I'm all about. I love the folklore aspect of these, ghost lore, cryptid sightings, all that stuff. It's all ingrained in like an Americana culture that's just kind of it's unique to the U.S. because the way the U.S. is kind of sprawled out with little towns that are all fairly young, within just a few hundred years old. There's cities on either coast and some scattered through the middle, but for the most part it's just all these little towns and small villages and stuff where culture kind of grows on its own. It's a very unique melting pot of folklore, and people came from all around the world and brought their cultural folklore with them and kind of mixed it together. Beautiful.
One of Detroit's oldest supernatural legends is the Nain Rouge, a small, grotesque, goblin-like figure whose sightings are said to foretell misfortune. While it didn't appear in any writings until the 1800s, the legend apparently dates back to the early 1700s. when Detroit's founder, Antoine de la Mothe Cadillac, reportedly encountered the creature.
Oh,
According
this
to
goes
later
back.
retellings, a fortune teller had told Cadillac to appease the small red creature, but instead, Cadillac struck the being with his cane after it appeared before him, an act that some believed cursed both the man and the settlement that he governed. Over time, the Nain Rouge
Cadillac smacked this little red dude with a cane, and that's why we have haunted Detroit. I like that.
became linked in folklore to a series of calamities in Detroit's history, including fires, civil unrest, economic hardship, and the city's long decline. Descriptions of the creature vary, but it's commonly portrayed as short, red-skinned, impish, and deformed, sometimes with glowing eyes and sharp teeth. Rather than behaving like a ghost, the Nain Rouge is typically framed as a malicious or trickster spirit, appearing briefly before vanishing. Meanwhile, standing on Woodward Avenue, there is the Whitney Mansion, now
Let's
operating
go
as the
through
Whitney
some of the other stuff that happens in the city of Detroit. We'll do it. Yeah, let's go.
restaurant. But unknown to many of its diners, it is one of Detroit's most well-known haunted historic buildings. Built in 1894 by wealthy lumber baron David Whitney Jr., the mansion has long been associated with reports of paranormal activity. Over the years, staff members and visitors have described unexplained footsteps, doors opening or closing on their own, cold spots, flickering lights, and that familiar
So I
sensation.
guess it's kind of like laying the framework is that Detroit is a city steeped in ghostly folklore and paranormal sightings. I think a lot of big cities have this kind of claim to fame, which is great because I love folklore. But St. Louis has stuff like this. Like there's a famous mansion. It's the one what's the mansion? Even Hannibal has Rockcliffe Mansion, which is haunted. But Chicago, Detroit, New Orleans is kind of famous for its ghostliness.
Being watched. Some witnesses claim to have seen apparitions, often described as a woman in period clothing.
I
Believed
gotta say, I love this lighting though, with the orange in the windows and the outside of the building lit with purple. Oh, magnifique. Especially with the parapet and everything. Yes, beautiful.
in local law to be tied to the Whitney family or the mansion's early occupants. There have been UFO sightings, haunted lighthouses, pubs. Michigan as a whole feels overcome with a strange uncanniness running through its streets. But for
There's the Michigan Triangle too.
tonight's case, we're going to be looking at a rather personal account. A case that took place over a relatively short span of time, reported by an ordinary working class family, documented in local newspapers, and centred on a small rental home on Martin Street. The house was perfect for what they needed. Sure, it was a little snug for Bill, his wife Lillian, their 5 young children, and a small terrier dog, but it was a home, and one that was close enough to Bill's work at the Cadillac plant. We have to wonder, if Bill didn't work nights, if the family would have realised something was wrong so quickly. The back room was small and dark, just off from the kitchen.
Oh my gosh, the working nights thing. I just talked about that. That's when I was having my experiences. Was when every time I worked overnights. Every time I worked at when I was younger and having those experiences in that room with the blackout curtains. I was working overnights at a factory called Die Makers. When I was having the second bout that I had, it was when I was working overnight as a direct support personnel for developmentally disabled folks.
It felt totally separated from the rest of the house, so Lillian didn't want any of the children to have it. They would instead share the other bedrooms in the property. But Bill saw a use for this room. He had worked a night shift for years, but still he would often struggle to sleep during the day, and he was always worried about disturbing his family when he came home in the early hours of the morning. So he thought this was the perfect place for him to get some sleep on occasion, away from everyone else. Bill would stumble in and crawl into bed for a few hours to get some decent sleep, before he'd have to get up and be a dad again. But while having the separate room helped Bill fall asleep quickly,
I found the address. Let's see if we can get in there and look. See how close we can get. All right, here we go. Cause I'm the map, I'm the map, I'm the map, I'm the map. We're going to be the map. All right. So, is it the one behind the tree? We're looking for 5508. I'm guessing it's this one behind this tree here. So maybe if we go down this way a little bit, we'll see. Yeah, and I would think that if they're talking about a room that's off the house, maybe it's this one back here. This fence is a sight to behold. Look at that. Short horizontal partition fence, partition fence, a 6 foot tall privacy fence with horizontal slats, a 6 foot tall privacy fence with vertical slats, another looks like privacy fence with horizontal slats that are not, well, these two are the same kind of, they're like nailed together. Another vertical one, but a new kind with pickets at the top, and then we got another brown one with pickets at the top. I need to figure out what the hotkey to mute my mic is, because I keep coughing in you guys' ear. Hopefully I didn't cough in your ear. But yeah, I mean, the house is blue now. I'd talk about it being gray. That's why I had wondered if the neighboring house wasn't the right one. Let's see if we can get a view from this side, though. All right. No, not too much. There's a sort of covered porch. We got lots of foliage, though. I actually kind of like that. Having that much foliage around your house helps keep your bills down. I think this is an elementary school across the street. Because of course it is. That's probably where the rumors come from about it being haunted. Munger Elementary and Middle School. So, yeah. It's not uncommon for the local haunted houses to be in the vicinity of the school. That's that's par for course, really. The haunted house in Palmyra, I actually lived in for about 8 years as an adult, was literally between you could do a triangle. It was right between the junior high and the elementary school.
Was clearly playing on his mind, because Bill began to have nightmares. But these weren't just any nightmares. They were vivid, terrifying. The sort of dreams that would stay with Bill for hours after he woke up. They felt so real. Bill had never experienced anything like this before. On occasion he would jolt up in bed, and Lillian would come running, due to his piercing screams echoing around the house. But Bill wouldn't stop screaming when his wife came in. He would continue until his throat gave out, and he would come to his senses. Bill never seemed to want to talk about what was happening in his dreams.
Oh, that sounds like he's having horrifying night terrors. I don't know how well night terrors were documented or understood at this point. This is in the 60s. I don't know how well they were documented at this time. Right? So it's something like that. The night terrors, sleep paralysis, hagging. Those things are gonna mess with you if you don't know what's going on. Like, and they messed with me until I figured out what was going on.
Briefly mentioned one, where he found himself opening a door, only for a mutilated body to fall out, crashing to the floor next to him. The dreams got worse and worse. Bill couldn't sleep anymore. He would want to, but it was like his brain was fighting against it, trying to protect him from that world that lay just beyond consciousness. It grew so bad Bill considered talking to a psychiatrist. He was very quickly unraveling. But then one day, he came back from the plant.
Oh, Bill, I get you. Yeah, unraveling. That's what it felt like, too. Still feels like that when I have these sort of experiences. It's discomforting to know that your brain can misfire like this.
Glanced into the small dark room and decided against it. Instead, he crept into the master bedroom and lay down next to his wife. Bill fell asleep instantly. He didn't have a nightmare. The next day again, he slept in the main bedroom and was fine. Maybe it was just the comfort of being next to his wife. Maybe it was the change in environment. Bill didn't care what the reason was. He was just relieved to be free of the nightmares. Over time, Bill
What if it was the room?
realised he only seemed to have the bad dreams when he slept in the back room. Bill and Lillian had ties back down south in Georgia. That was still where most of their friends and family were, so they didn't see them often. But in August of 1962, around 9 months after they had moved in, Bill's grandmother came to stay for the weekend. They set up the back room as a guest room, and she was happy to see the children after so long. After a long day together, everyone headed off to bed. Bill's grandmother wouldn't get any sleep that night. Every time she began to drift off, she was convinced that someone was making a noise in the room. At first, she couldn't quite figure out what was going on. Was it something outside the window? But after hearing it repeat,
Yeah, and it's the 60s, so like I was saying, not everybody was fully, you know, aware of all the psychological stuff back at this time. We've come a long way since the 60s in understanding like things like sleep paralysis and all these psychological triggers. But that's a lot of that is, and this is the thing that I'm gonna say here. And yeah, feel free to disagree with it. A lot of that research and advancement in our understanding was done through the lens of parapsychology, right? Of trying to find out if these things are supernatural or not. All the debunking that's been done about this stuff. It's all, so, I mean, people like want to poo-poo cryptozoologists, paranormal investigators, and things like that. Some of them are, you know, grifters and hoaxers and trying to make money or whatever. I mean, hell, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm here to make money. My broke ass is here to make money. If you have money to spare, you can do a super chat. You can do a super sticker. You can gift some memberships to some people. If you want something in return for it, you can go out there to my store and pick yourself out a CrypticCorner t-shirt or some Pride socks or a Mothman tank top. The sky's the limits on what I have available out there. No, not really. You'll see what's available. There's coffee cups and stuff too. But yeah, how did I get into doing a capitalism? I think it's because I saw my thing about buy a cryptozoologist a coffee. And wanted to make sure that everybody knew that they could do that. You're all able to buy me a coffee by going to that link. Yeah, but these organizations, the psychological research foundations and stuff like that. Yeah, we laugh at them now in the 21st century, but in the late 19th century and the early 20th century and into the mid 20th century, these places did, you know, do the research that the more serious institutions were not wanting to touch or mess with, and were instrumental in debunking a lot of it. I mean, again, I acknowledge that a lot of them were just instrumental in spreading misinformation and grifting hoaxes and stuff like that, but a lot of them were honest people. Looking like myself, I'm an honest skeptical cryptozoologist. I would love to find Bigfoot, but I don't think so. Just things like that. But people going out into the woods looking for Bigfoot, it further helps to it's research into the phenomena, you know, because regardless of whether Bigfoot's real, people are having these experiences in the forest. Same thing with like the hag and the fact that in 1962 we might not have known too much about what these experiences were or how they're psychologically shared across the human species, but so it would seem very, very paranormal and supernatural.
Immediately, she began to realize it was the door. The door was shut, but it sounded like someone was trying to get in. Initially thinking it was the kids messing about, she went and opened the door, but there was no one there. As soon as she got into bed, it began again. The following morning, Bill came down to find his grandmother sitting at the kitchen table.
Wait. Opened the door, but there was no one there. The door was shut, but okay. All right. I missed that part. Sorry.
The following morning, Bill came down to find his grandmother sitting at the kitchen table. She was shaking, her skin pale, eyes black. Bill asked her what was wrong. She told him there were terrible sounds in that room, that all night long she was kept awake. She was convinced that someone was trying to break into her room, but there was no one there. She couldn't explain it. She just said that she never wanted to sleep in that room ever again. She tried to shake off the events of that night, trying to reassure herself that there was a logical explanation.
I mean, yeah, it's creepy.
She couldn't. She felt so uneasy she began the trip back to Georgia later that day, having only stayed for a single night. It was at this point that Bill...
And that's like Amityville stuff right there. Oh, what was it? It was a nun at Amityville. They're like, oh, she came and stayed for one night and got sick and then left. And kind of doing the same thing.
When Lillian really started to put things together. It wasn't just Bill's dreams anymore. They hadn't said anything to their grandmother about that. And yet she felt uncomfortable in that room too. But it wasn't just her either. They then began to realise that the kids would run around the entire house playing, but they would never go into that back room. They had never been told not to, and none of them had ever raised any concerns about the room. It was like they just naturally avoided it. The dog too, normally always happy to follow Bill around, wouldn't step foot into that room. These small details had gone unnoticed, until now. But this had all been the case.
That's funny too. Again, there's a short coming out I'm going to talk about some of the experiences I've had through my life. But there's the situation with a dog not wanting to go around the area where you're having problems. A lot of people with schizophrenia or other conditions that cause hallucinations, especially visual hallucinations, will have a dog that helps them identify whether something that's seeing, a person that they're seeing or an entity that they're encountering is really there.
Since they moved in. 2 months later, their friend, although in some versions of the story he's referred to as a cousin, Shirley Patterson, came to visit. We obviously began with Shirley's encounter at the start of tonight's episode, but I didn't give you the full story. What Shirley didn't know was that Bill and Lillian were using him effectively as a test subject.
I welcome anybody to use me as a test subject for the haunted rooms in their home. Please do. I want to be your test subject. You don't even have to hide it from me. You can tell me right up front. Hey, crazy shit happens in this room. Have at it, Brie.
Bill was described as a no-nonsense southern gentleman. He had a very practical, matter-of-fact way of thinking, and wouldn't be spooked easily if there was something that made people uneasy in that room. Bill and Lillian decided that if it happened to Shirley too, then maybe there really was something wrong with their home. Shirley was quoted in a later article, confirming he didn't know anything about the room. He had no reason to be afraid. He was simply visiting his friends and spending a bit of time in Detroit. As we've already heard, Bill left for work that night and Shirley retreated to bed.
Right, sure. I'm not saying that there's not something about that room or something happening in that room that makes people uneasy. Maybe there's some infrasound coming through. Maybe there's a gas leak. It almost does sound like a gas leak.
Very soon after laying his head on his pillow, he felt himself being pulled over, practically turned around, seemingly by an invisible presence. But that didn't mean he was alone as such, because standing just several feet away in the doorway of the room was a woman in a fur coat, with her back to him. Bill obviously assumed it was Lillian at first, but when he suddenly realised it wasn't, he knew there was an intruder in the house and jumped up to confront the strange woman. He screamed loudly and charged towards her, before all the lights suddenly switched off, plunging Shirley into darkness. He stumbled about in the darkened kitchen.
My speculation on that event would be maybe that the lights were already off and he was in a hypnopompic state where he was up moving around but still in his dream where he was seeing things, and then he finally woke up from that and realized he was standing in the dark alone. Because that's happened to me when I had a basement. I didn't have like a supernatural experience or anything. I had a basement bedroom though, and my bedroom was the only part of the basement that was finished, and the bathroom was out in the open area of the unfinished basement. And a couple of times I would wake up, I guess you could call it sleepwalking, would wake up like from a dream where everything was visually acute to being suddenly in the darkness, and I'm like, where the fuck am I? And I'm out in the dark basement, and I finally, when my eyes adjust a little bit, I see like the little, the high window up in the back of the basement, letting some street light in or whatever. And I'm like, what the fuck am I doing out here? Why am I walking around out in the dark basement outside my room in the middle of the night? So yeah. Woo! Love you, Kelly. Mwah. Talking about your topic that you wanted everyone to vote for. Kelly was out hyping this one. She wanted to get this story told. I guess she hadn't heard of it before. I'm glad I could be the one to bring this tale to you, Kelly. Thank you so much for joining. Yeah, Kelly was up late with me last night, so I didn't sleep well either.
Terrified, when suddenly the lights came back on. He was there, alone. He ran back to his room. There was no one in there. He rushed around the house, moving quietly so as not to disturb the children. No one. There was no woman. He went back to the kitchen and sat down, shaken by what had happened. All the commotion had caused
Finding him the same place they found Grandma.
Lillian to come out and see what was going on. Shirley looked terrified. Lillian had never seen the man like this before. Even before he spoke, she knew that something had happened with the room. Shirley opened his mouth and said, "I saw," but before he could get another word out, a sound came from somewhere else. It was like a wail. They later described it as something between a person screaming and an animal howl. This mournful, wailing groan. Both of them froze, looking around trying to figure out where it had come from.
So we're in Michigan, right? So maybe the horrible hag That's fine. No, you don't have to get some rest, Kelly. Love you, doll. Mwah. Take care of yourself. But since we're in Michigan, maybe the horrible hag is also a Michigan dog man, and she transforms.
That's when they realised. It sounded like it came from the back bedroom. The bedroom door was open. They could see into it. There was no one there. They glanced back at each other, speechless.
Hang around, native atheists. Sometimes people drop gift memberships, and you might just get one. No, not unless you hang out in doorways on Martin Street wearing a fur coat. I mean, if you do, it could be you. This was 1962. I don't think you're that old. I don't think you're even close to that old. But yeah, it was 1962, and it was on Martin Street. We were just down there. I don't know how close this is to your stomping ground. There's an elementary school right here. Munger Elementary School. It's right across the street from Munger Elementary School in Detroit. And I guess what would be considered South Detroit. So, yeah, maybe this is what happened to the lonely girl who took the midnight train going anywhere. She ended up on Martin Street right here with this wild ass fence. This fence, that's wild, right? Am I the only one who's like, this fence though? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be mean or make fun of it or anything. I'm just like, it's a crazy fence. It looks like whoever lives here is a truck driver though, or was whoever lived here. The backyard's looking pretty dumpy too. I can't get too much closer. It'll zoom in and make me drop down. Does it let you walk down in the alley? No. Sometimes it'll let you in the alleys. But not this time. What if we do this? Spin it around. You spin me right round. Detroit hag. So there's a big diesel right there. Okay, there's an abandoned lot. Alright, horrifying hag. Let's keep going.
Then the smell came. Both of them reported an overwhelming smell that made them retch and gag. Shirley stood up and walked towards the bedroom. It seemed clear the smell was originating from there, but he couldn't figure out what was causing it. The bedroom...
There are coyotes in Detroit now. I don't know when coyotes reached Michigan. They haven't been there that long. When did coyotes reach Michigan? Coyotes first appeared in Michigan. Oh, yep, in the late 1890s. They established a firm presence in the Upper Peninsula by 1927, leading to the implementation of state system boundaries from 1935 to 1975. Because coyotes aren't naturally in that part of the world. Kelly says, I've lived in the area years ago, but no, I stay near closer to 8 Mile now, maybe miles away. The suburbs you can find some. You don't find many coyotes in the city. Yeah.
Barely had anything in it. But as quickly as the smell would come, it faded away. That's when they heard a new sound. A banging. It was coming from the utility room. The pair walked into the room and both saw it. There was a trapdoor in the utility room.
Are Shirley and Lillian in here banging and they're trying to come up with a story to tell the husband?
That led down to a partially dug out basement area. The door was heavy and left closed to stop the children from getting in. But the trapdoor was raising itself up several inches before crashing back down into place again.
Ooh,
as if someone...
that's some Evil Dead stuff. Remember on Evil Dead when the floorboard and you have what was her name? What was the woman's name in the basement? Because I think it starts with an H. There we go. Evil Dead. Henrietta, there we go. Henrietta
was trying to get in. That was when they called the police. The police turned up and searched the entire property, from the attic down to the basement, and they found nothing. There was not even a sign that someone had attempted to break in, nor anything that could explain the things that Lillian and Shirley had claimed to see. Bill Adams returned home that morning to find his wife and friends still awake, waiting up for him. They laid out the whole story of what had happened that night, but Bill couldn't accept it. Sure, he'd had nightmares. Sure, he felt uneasy in that room, but this was a whole other level. Were they suggesting this was a ghost? Bill...
Shirley and Bill. Mojo, Psalms, monkey farts, or gorilla farts? I don't know what you mean by that.
couldn't believe that. He was quoted as saying, "I am a grown man with a family. I've been in the army. I just couldn't convince myself there was anything to it." Bill hadn't slept in the back room in months at this point, but after Shirley's story he decided he had no choice but to confront this phenomena himself.
You better get
to
it,
see
Bill.
if there was any truth to it.
Get that hag, Bill.
To see if he could figure out what was really going on. That night at about 7:30 p.m, Bill went to the back bedroom and laid in the bed. The children had been sent to bed. Lillian and Shirley sat
Children
in
were sent to bed at 7:30 p.m. Damn.
the living room in nervous silence, waiting to see if anything would happen. Bill laid there, facing the wall just as Shirley had. He was there for a while, unable to sleep, but not feeling anything unusual, when he suddenly heard his wife in the room. Bill whispered to her that she needed to leave him alone to do this, that he didn't think this thing would show up if they were both in there. As soon as he spoke, Lillian, or at least who he thought was Lillian, stopped moving. The room was silent. He didn't hear her leave. It was like she just stopped moving.
Spooky!
Slightly annoyed, Bill turned around to see what his wife was doing. There, right next to the bed, just inches away from him, was a face. A twisted, grotesque face of a woman who hadn't been in our world for quite some time. Bill said it was like her eyes stared past him, like it was looking in his direction but maybe not at him exactly. But that is when its mouth began to move, as though it were about to talk. All that came out was a hissing noise and a horrible, foul stench. To call it fear would do a disservice to Bill's reaction to seeing this. He jumped out of bed, screaming, running out of the room as fast as he could. Lillian and Shirley came rushing out to the kitchen to find Bill wailing like a man.
Yeah. Wait.
Madman. Good. Lillian and Shirley came rushing out to the kitchen to find Bill wailing like a madman, pulling chunks of his hair out. What he had seen was impossible. What he had seen was indescribable. It sent the man into a bout of temporary madness. Shirley tried to grab Bill to stop him from hurting himself, but Bill, so overwhelmed with adrenaline, easily forced his way out of the larger man's grip and began flailing his arms at Shirley. Lillian grabbed a blanket from the living room and along with Shirley threw it over Bill and wrestled him to the floor.
They threw a blanket over him and wrestled him to the floor. That's crazy.
Pinning him down until his senses came back. As they held him down, they noticed it again. The smell from last night, was back. After some time of calming down and then searching the house yet again to be sure no one had got in, Bill told Shirley and Lillian exactly what he saw. He didn't know what it was exactly, but he knew they couldn't stay there. 1 hour later, the house on Martin Street was empty. They had grabbed the children from their beds and fled to Lillian's parents in Dearborn. They never wanted to go back to that house again.
And it was a rental house, so we could rent that. Actually, the Hive could rent that. And I could live up in Detroit and hang out with Kelly. Y'all want to rent this house for me? And then I'll sleep exclusively in that back room and see what we can drum up.
They had paid their rent for the following month already, but the Adamses gave their notice and quickly found a new house to rent, only returning for their belongings during the day and with the company of friends and family. But some of those family members were intrigued. Before their lease ended, Lillian's brother Leo begged his sister to let him go and see the room for himself. She said if that's what he really...
That's what I was thinking too, Hoosiers, that it does sound a lot like a gas leak of some kind, maybe, in that it's infecting that room specifically, or that part of the house specifically, because they even talk about smell too, so it's like... And that, you know, they added the smell artificially to gas so you can detect it. Oh, Deviant's here, and is now a cryptic creeper.
Wanted, she would lend him the keys, but she would not go back there with him. Instead, Leo brought along his other sister, Virginia. Leo and Virginia arrived at the house on Martin Street one night in November. The pair was sitting in the kitchen when Leo said to his sister that he was going to go into the back bedroom, turn off the lights, and lay there for 10 minutes to see if anything would happen. Virginia, the slightly more nervous of the pair, was happy to let her brother go and have his silly fun, so she waited in the kitchen.
I would absolutely do that in this house too. I know me. I'd be like, okay, I want all you all to sit down here in the kitchen or the family room or whatever. I'm going to go in there by myself. I'm going to lay in that bed. I'm going to turn the lights off, and I'm going to wait.
A few moments passed, and Virginia heard what she described as an awful groan coming from the back room. Her first instinct was that Leo was messing with her, but the sound was weird.
Yay, we got gift memberships. Thank you so much, Miss Kelly King. They went to Indigo, Sapphire Vi. They went to Ashley Loves Blaha. They went to Burns 3132. Martin L. Zen. I guess we'll go with that. Dr. Osiris. Yeah, I thought I was a member already. Thought I fixed that last time, but apparently not. Well, we're happy to have you. Happy to have you, Deviant.
She couldn't quite explain it, but something about it made her question if her brother was even capable of making such a sound. She didn't have too long to mull that question over in her mind, though. Leo came running out of the back room, grabbed his sister by the arm and said they needed to leave. The look on Leo's face made Virginia instantly know he wasn't messing about. They quickly left the house. Leo wouldn't tell Virginia what he saw.
Always dangerous to go first.
In the back room, what had made him so terrified. In fact, he refused to talk about it with anyone. The Adamses were gone from the house on Martin Street now, but their story was starting to do the rounds in the local area. A number of people contacted the landlady, asking if they could conduct investigations in the property, but she refused, not letting anyone in, and wanting to kill off this ghost story as quickly as she could, so she could get...
I would capitalize on the ghost story because we live in a capitalist society. I would have been like, yeah, I actually do have ghosts in here, and I charge people $500 for one night. You could go in there, you can set up all your paranormal activity equipment, and yeah.
Get some new tenants in. The Adamses didn't experience anything unusual in their new home, and according to most write-ups you can find on this case online, neither did any of the new residents in that house on Martin Street. But that isn't completely accurate. In 1973, 10 years after the Adamses had fled the home in the middle of the night, the Detroit Free Press published a follow-up article on the haunting. They interviewed the current occupant of the home, a woman named Grace Willis. I'm unsure how long Grace had been living in the property at this time. She said she found the whole idea of the haunting ridiculous, and hadn't experienced anything strange. But as the reporter spoke with her further, Grace did reveal two interesting bits of information. There had been one day when she was sitting in the living room with her sister-in-law, when they heard what they described as the cascade of breaking dishes crashing to the floor. They rushed into the kitchen, both convinced that one of the cupboards must have collapsed. But when they entered the kitchen, there was nothing wrong, and no obvious source for what could have created such a distinctive sound. But still, Grace didn't believe the place was haunted. In fact, she knew there was nothing wrong with the back bedroom, because ever since she had moved in, she had been sleeping in there. But it was a strange detail she hadn't considered until talking about it with the reporter. She could only ever fall asleep if she laid on her side, facing the wall, away from the door. Her mind wouldn't rest if she looked towards that bedroom door. So what really happened? The story was picked up by the Detroit Free Press shortly after the Adamses made their escape, and the report split the local community.
And she did not do any effort to capitalize on it, that landlord. That's a failed venture. This could be a tourist destination now. You could be like selling Detroit Hag merchandise in a little shop right out front of a little kiosk in front of your house. But you screwed up. You messed up. You done messed up.
Some thought the family was simply looking for attention. Others claimed that the family had a falling out with their landlady and had invented the haunting story to get back at her. But it's worth noting the time this took place. While it's not out of the question, being this was the early 1960s, it does fit into a time in history before the real boom of paranormal haunted house claimants that took place throughout the 1970s, before slowly beginning to die off in the late 1980s. This was a time when the paranormal became a huge focal point in popular culture, and the amount of people claiming to have been living in a haunted house was huge, especially off the back of the whole Amityville story. That's not to suggest that false claims of the paranormal didn't happen before the 1970s. Of course they did. but it was certainly a slightly more unusual story at the time than we maybe would see it as now.
Well, I mean, I guess it sounds like maybe some of the archetypes are there too that that took hold in later haunted house narratives. Well, Dave, that's the start. Okay, doing some Bigfoot stomping.
Others believed that the family really were scared away, but that it was the work of people, not ghouls. That someone had been getting into their basement and messing with them. Of course, this doesn't really explain what Shirley and Bill both see, but maybe this heightened sense of fear caused both men to imagine things. It's worth noting that the initial reporting of this story seemingly took place just a week after the family left their house, and included interviews with a number of the people involved. So this doesn't feel...
But we haven't even discussed a gas leak yet. Did they
feel like one of those cases
Did they investigate?
where faded memories, leading to exaggerations, could be blamed for the details. This is another case where it doesn't appear the people involved really gained anything from their story, beyond a small amount of attention at the time. It seems like Bill and his family told their story to the reporter that one time, and then just moved on with their lives.
They didn't go full Amityville. That's where they dropped the ball, because Detroit could have been the Amityville, could have been the original, the OG. They could have had tours, and the Warrens could have come and investigated and found demon ghosts and stuff, but they really dropped the ball on this one. I'm glad we pulled this one out of the rubbish heap and dusted it off, because I actually like the Hag a lot better than the stuff in Amityville. I like the idea of just a single entity. It looks like a creepy old lady haunting a house and no one knows why. I love that.
Disappearing off and leaving behind this strange little paranormal story for people like me and writers such as Brad Steger, who I relied on heavily for this episode, to obsess over for decades to come. They even left the property with a month's rent paid up in advance. So if this were a hoax, they effectively lost money to pull it off. Could they have just made it up? Of course. But I like to try and give people the benefit of the doubt in stories like this. So what else could it have been if not a hoax? Well, the old familiar
A gas leak.
Environmental factors could be at play here, a gas leak being the more obvious one. Most of the phenomena is segregated to one area of the house. It starts out with a feeling of unease and paranoia, but escalates over time. The more vivid moments that could be hallucinations are accompanied by a strong smell. There is also the fact that the landlady wouldn't let anyone investigate the property. Was this due to her not wanting to entertain the idea of ghosts? Or was she trying to cover up a potentially dangerous home environment before her next tenants moved in? Bill only sees
Well,
the
you
Hag...
think that would be something she'd have an inspector come in and do after that, to say, hey, is there a gas leak?
After Shirley claims to have seen a woman in the house. Did Shirley's sighting play on Bill's mind and influence his hallucinations on that last night?
That's actually a good
But
question.
if this were the case, it's interesting that it is Shirley who suffers the most vivid hallucinations, at least up until that point, within just a few moments of being in the room. But Bill was the one who was sleeping in that room for weeks, if not months. And if their story is accurate, both Lillian and Shirley
we can actually
witnessed...
get kind of an idea of... I wonder if we can go inside of it. It's on Zillow. Alright, so... we can look at the house, though. It's on Zillow. 5508 Martin Street, 2 beds, 1 bath, 655 square feet. Single family, built in 1898. Rent is, actually that's not bad. 11, well, for 2 bedrooms, yeah, 1180 is not bad. Does anybody leave comments? I want to see if anybody says anything about it being the Hag House. We're just looking. Control this. Okay. Alright, not much to see there. But yeah, so 1180 is not too bad.
There's the moving basement trapdoor, and groans coming from the bedroom together, suggesting that, at the very least, could not be a simple hallucination. So, what if this truly were?
Ooh, Patty Troy says, I think I saw a version of the hag on a bus 15 years ago. She was sobbing and white as a ghost. No one seemed to see her but me. That's spooky. Yeah.
Paranormal. It's interesting how here, as in so many similar cases, the phenomena grows stronger the more that attention is paid to it. Bill was having nightmares and feeling uneasy, but he only saw the apparition when he was at a point where he wanted to face it head on. The various visitors to the house that experienced stuff didn't know about the apparent haunting, but Lillian and Bill were becoming increasingly aware of it, and the more it plays on their minds,
See, he primed himself for that too, though, Bill did.
the more vividly the activity appears for others as well. I'm so curious to know if there was truly no further activity after the family left. We obviously hear a few little details from the resident in the 1970s, but if the landlady was trying her hardest to keep the story quiet, I'm curious if there are other stories that just haven't come to light. I wonder
If it gets more powerful, the more people that know about it, like Freddy Krueger, or like a Tulpa.
how many other residents of the home
It's actually high for that area, is it? I mean, I don't know. I don't know housing prices in Detroit. Just around here mostly.
left soon after renting the place out. It appears the house is still standing today, although how much of it is the original property and how much has been completely redone is unclear. There is something to me about this story that, if we take it at face value, I find genuinely chilling. But it's not the experiences of any of the people in the story that bother me. It's the entity.
My very first apartment, my very first one-bedroom apartment, my rent was $450.
That is now commonly referred to as the horrible hag of Detroit. While the interactions with her seem to terrify the people around her, the entity itself never really seems to do anything cruel. Bill has terrible dreams. He sees a body in at least one of them. They hear her make sounds. The grandmother is convinced that someone is trying to come into the room. Someone is trying to get out of the basement. On that final night, she opens her mouth, apparently to try and speak, but all that escapes her lips is a hiss. Sure, tales of demonic hauntings are terrifying in their own way, or the chaos of a poltergeist infestation, but a case like this really gets to me. Because what if the hag, as they call her, isn't some malevolent presence? What if she is trapped in our world, desperately trying to communicate with the people in this reality that she once called home, but no matter how hard she tries, she just can't. All she creates is fear, trapped in her own personal hell.
So she's trying to escape from her from this liminal space that she's trapped in by communicating with these house people, but all she does is terrify them. That is a horrible concept. It's kind of the premise to The Sixth Sense, like all the ghosts and stuff that contact the little boy in The Sixth Sense. They're all just trying to like get messages out so they can move on.
Unable to call out for help. It makes you wonder, whose body was Bill dreaming about? And if that basement under the trapdoor is only partially dug, what could be buried in the ground? That's all for this entry into Tape Library. Every episode I do on a haunted house, I'll always get at least one comment, asking why the people didn't move out instantly, so it's quite refreshing to find a case where this basically happened. Again, I think this was another story that was requested by one of you lot.
I mean, that's the Amityville house too. They moved out immediately.
If you did bring this to my attention, thank you. As always, I want to hear your thoughts and theories on this case in the comments below.
Be sure
so
to
let me know
drink
what you
your
think happened.
Ovaltine. You're doing your decoder ring.
I know I don't always get to reply to everyone, but I read almost every comment at the very least, and I massively enjoy the conversations around these topics. Time to wrap up for another night. Of course, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one. If you want to help me out with just a couple of quick clicks, you can like this video if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening to the podcast, then leave me a 5-star rating. I know it gets boring hearing this every episode, but it does massively help me to reach people.
And you can do this stuff for me too. But that was the horrible hag of Detroit. What did you guys think? Were you familiar with this little piece of urban folklore? Had you heard of it before? Heard something similar? Does your town have something similar? Let me know in the comments down below if you think that there's something in your local area that we should cover on Cryptic Corner, whether it's a UFO, a Bigfoot, or a haunted house. We want to know. We want to see. We want to explore the folklore that built your world. Yeah. All right. Deviant Outcast says, "Wow, we're paying rent around $600 a month for 2 bathrooms, 3 rooms. Okay, we'll rub it in." I think that this place that we're in right now is like, I don't know, $2,400, I think, a month. 2 bathrooms and 3 bedrooms. No balcony. Yeah, we do have access to a pool and a gym though. I don't ever use them, but we have access to them
on these platforms.
All right. So, horrible hag. Yeah, let me know what your experience is with the supernatural down below too. I love to hear your all stories. And please remember to be kind, take care, and we will see you next time. All right, don't go anywhere because the show's not over. We're only halfway through the show. We still have the whole Weekend Weird to go, and we're talking about giant Tartarian trees. So you're not going to want to miss that. You're going to want to be part of that. You're going to want to participate into that. So about a haunted bunk bed hag entity. Neat, Patty. That'd be interesting. All right, so I'm going to take an intermission, go potty. And when we get back, we're going to visit the realm of Tartaria, and we're going to look at giant trees. So I'll see you back here in just a few minutes.
Koalas in the rain. No fuss given. Koalas in the rain. No fuss given.
Poor little thing's kicked out of the tree. You can come to our tree. Yeah, come to our tree. Poor little thing. There's plenty of trees. Come on. You're a meanie.
All right, hello, my beauties and bees, and welcome back to another installment of our Weekend Weird. We ran the polls this week about, excuse me, what we were going to cover, and the Lost Trees of Tartaria has kind of ebbed itself out as the champion this week, so that's what we're exploring. But I refuse to explore the realm of Tartaria alone when there's so many excellent resources out there to give us the full nonsense of the Tartarian conspiracy. And I think one of the best is probably the Tartarian historian. And actually, was this on there yesterday? This is a brand new one. This just came out. Tartarian giant trees were real, so who cut them down? All right, so there's a lot to unpack here with the trees of Tartaria. And this channel, they have the bells too. We talked about the bells over here too, yeah. If Tartaria had giant trees, where did they go? Tartaria giant trees were real, so so why were they removed? And actually, I'm going to just focus on this channel, I think. I don't think there's need to explore into this other channel. The Tartaria Central. Sorry, Tartaria Central. Tartaria Historian's gonna take the lead on this one. And we're gonna talk about giant trees. This channel's only been around about a month too, so all this is so fresh. So fresh. You can smell the freshness. So let's start with we'll start here. If Tartaria had giant trees, where did they go? No, these are just normal big trees. Like these aren't mountain-sized trees like what I was thinking when I think Tartarian trees. These are just like sequoias and redwoods and stuff. You talking about them koalas? I never knew koalas made that sound. I didn't know that sound. Know what sound they made. Yeah, they sound like little squeaky toys. Yeah, you don't want to cuddle a koala. No audio on the video? Okay. Let me see. Okay, there we go.
They show you the borders, the trade routes, the cities marked with careful Latin script along the margins. They show you the rivers and the mountain ranges, and the names of peoples that no longer appear in any modern geography textbook. But if you look long enough, if you stop reading the labels and start reading the images themselves, you notice something that the cartographers drew with the same careful hand they used for everything else. Something so large it fills the background of entire regions. Something that modern eyes tend to...
So far, none of the trees that you've shown are bigger than trees that exist right now. I want to see the giant trees.
Skip over because the mind does not have a category for it. The trees, not trees, the way we understand trees today, not the kind of thing you pass on a highway and barely register. The trees in these old illustrations are drawn behind cities, the way mountains are drawn behind cities. They are not decoration. They are geography. And for a civilization that most people have never been taught existed...
Show me this art you're talking about.
A civilization that stretched across the northern face of the world from the edges of Europe
deep these are into big trees you're showing in these photos, but they're not like abnormally, supernaturally big. These are, just like, again, sequoias and redwoods. They still trees this big still exist. I want to see the ones that don't.
The heart of Asia. These trees were apparently as fundamental to the landscape as the rivers and the plains themselves. That civilization goes by many names in the old records. But the one that appears most consistently across hundreds of European maps, encyclopedias, and diplomatic documents spanning several centuries is Tartaria. And what grew in Tartaria, according to the people who were there and wrote about what they saw, was something that our modern understanding of the natural world has never fully accounted for. If you're new here, welcome to the channel, where we dive into history and uncover what has been lost to time. If content like
Well, you better show me some giant ass trees. These are just big trees.
this interests you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Now let's get into the video.
Poisonous trees in Florida. You have my attention, Kelly. What are we talking about?
The first thing to understand about Tartaria is that it was not a myth when it appeared in these records. It was treated as a geographic reality, the way Europe treated Asia or Africa as a place with territories, peoples, climates, and resources. The encyclopedias of the 17th and early 18th
Oh my
century...
goodness. Okay, let me... Tartaria. Okay. All right, so... Let's zoom out of Detroit here. Get out of Detroit, because we're going to cross the Pacific here. See this big-ass area right here, north of the mountains? This big-ass area is an area that we could now call Russia. A lot of it's Siberia, especially this section over here. But to the Europeans, all of the land east of the Caucasus and north of the Hindu Kush and all this down here, where you got here's the Caucasus, and what's this mountain range here that divides called? I can't remember it starts with an A, maybe. But yeah, these mountain ranges down here, you got Hindu Kush and the Himalayas. Well, the Himalayas are down here, right? But all this highland and stuff up here, everything north of that, all this that you're kind of seeing green here, was what they called on old maps Tartaria, what the Europeans called on old maps Tartaria. And it's just the name of this big region. This is where horses come from too, if you're interested in that kind of stuff. Camels were also domesticated in this region of the world. And a lot of this is what used to be the Mammoth Steppe long, long ago. So it's a unique biome. The darker green that you see is a lot of it is taiga. So, but it's a huge area. But you know what else is a huge area? This down here, right here. You know what? They didn't call this China back then. They called it Cathay. The Ural Mountains. Exactly. That's what I was talking about. The Ural Mountains. Thank you. Jared, I couldn't remember the name. I kept wanting to think about the Almosti, and I was like, oh, so it's the Alma Mountains. Yeah, but this area down here wasn't called China; it was called Cathay. So, just the Europeans had their own names for stuff. I mean, India, calling this India, that's not what they called themselves. This is what the Europeans came up with that name, and they even called they were even so unoriginal they called this the West Indies. East Indies, West Indies. So yeah, the fact that they had a weird name, Tartaria, for this region of Asia is not surprising, because they had weird names for all these places too. Cathay, India is the weird name. They called everything down here Nubia. This was all Nubia down here. Right? Or Ethiopia. Sometimes this would all be Ethiopia. Sometimes Nubia was in the west and Ethiopia was in the east. Just different stuff like that. There was times where all this was considered Egypt, or all this was considered Algeria, right? The reason these people didn't call themselves Scandinavians, right? That's a label that we put on them, the region, Scandinavia. So just to be so weird about the name Tartaria appearing on maps when, you know, this whole area down here would have been called Nubia and no one would have batted an eye. Tartar sauce is yummy with fish. All right. So back to...
Describe it with the same matter-of-fact authority they used for France or Persia or the Ottoman Empire.
Or Cathay or Nubia.
It occupied an enormous portion of the known world, and the people who travelled there, who crossed the long grasslands and entered the deeper interior, described a landscape that becomes harder and harder to explain the more carefully you read their accounts. They described forests, but not forests, the way a French nobleman or an English merchant would have understood the word. Not managed woodlands, not timber reserves, not the kind of cultivated European tree cover that had been shaped by centuries of human use. They described something older, something that operated at a scale that the travellers themselves struggled to translate into language that their readers back home would be able to process. One account, written by a traveller crossing...
I cannot stress enough that, before I let the whole Tartaria thing slip, that the whole Tartarian conspiracy is literally a Russian supremacist, Russian white supremacist conspiracy. It's basically like, we are they're in this conspiracy, the Russians are the Atlanteans who had this mythical kingdom before the mud floods came. And their kingdom didn't just cover this portion. They also allegedly, according to the conspiracy theory, populated North and South America and Oceania. The Tartarians did, right? But all nonsensical, of course.
Into the deeper Tartarian territories in the mid-17th century, describes riding beneath a continuous canopy for 3 full days without once seeing direct sunlight. The light came down through the leaves in long, slow columns, thick with...
Yeah, I love hearing about primeval forest, because we don't really have too many anymore. Like, you don't have the Mirkwood, where you spend days in the darkness under the forest canopy. You don't have that anymore. Well, maybe you do in, like, the Amazon or something, not a sylvanic forest, not a deciduous forest. Definitely not a taiga, where you're stuck under it like that. It would be amazing. Yeah, Deviant, it did not take long, did it, for this to grind your gears. One time I had Megan Lewis on, and we talked about this conspiracy theory a bit, because Megan Lewis is an Assyriologist, a very funny one too. She's got a channel where she cracks me up, but doing like Dial of Deity. Anyway, but she came on, and we were following this conspiracy, and they were talking about how the Second Temple in Israel was built using redwood timbers harvested from Northern California, which was part of Tartaria at the time. It was a really wild ride. So we weren't covered in mud, but it's mud-covered people who's supposed to be on top. That's the new take on racial cleanliness.
Moisture, warm with an organic heat that the writer compared to the interior of a greenhouse, but far larger and far older than any greenhouse human hands had built. He did not say the trees were large, he said the trees were the world. That phrase, that specific distinction, appears in more than one account from more than one tradition, and that repetition is worth paying attention to, because there is a meaningful difference between a tree that is simply tall and a tree that is a world. A tall tree is a curiosity, a tree that generates its own weather, that redirects water through its root systems, that creates a biological architecture so complete that entire ecosystems exist within its structure without ever needing to touch the ground. That is a different category of organism entirely.
Yes, and it actually did exist on our planet. And there was these ecosystems were real. There were real ecosystems of dark primeval forest where you could travel across the hundreds of miles without ever touching the ground by moving through the canopy if you were built to move through the canopy. Yes, that's real. That's absolutely real. The North America used to be like that too. You used to be able to, there used to be forests from the Appalachian Mountains to the Ozarks like this. Here I go again. Getting excited and throwing maps up, but like, you used to be able to like walk from Maine to like Texas, completely in the forest, like almost the whole way. Devil's Tower was a Tartarian tree. Yeah, I hope we get to that, because right now he's just showing a lot of pictures of old logging camps with big trees, like redwoods, sequoia-sized trees, but nothing supernaturally big.
And Tartaria, according to the oldest surviving records, was full of them. Now the immediate objection is obvious. Surely these were exaggerations. Surely the cartographers of the 16th and 17th centuries were not working with modern standards of scientific accuracy. And surely a traveller crossing an unfamiliar landscape in an unfamiliar part of the world might be inclined to make the trees seem a little larger than they actually were, in order to make the journey sound more dramatic.
These trees still look like normal sized trees. Let me, because they're still, we still have giant redwood forests now, right? Like, this isn't a new phenomena. Like, these big trees are real. Like, they exist. And we can drop down into the forest and see them. Look, watch. Oh, you gotta go down there, dude. That's what I pay you for. Coward. Coward, drop down into the Tartarian forest. I command you. Sorry, I had to get a little witchy. So, like, I mean, obviously it's good. A lot of people are going to see this and be like, oh, the Star Wars forest. Yes. Yes, it is the Star Wars forest. It absolutely is. And it exists, and it still exists, and it's still here, and it still has giant trees. Right? That reach up to the sky. So yeah, it's still definitely a thing. Look at the size of these trees. They're huge. They're bigger around than these vehicles are. But I want to see the mountain-sized ones. Ooh, that's kind of cool looking. I like how they are so massive they actually show up on the maps. That's so badass. Big tree. You see the big ones, the giant sequoia sticking up above everything else. A lot of them are dead, unfortunately, but isn't that cool? Yeah.
That is a reasonable objection, but it does not hold up when you look at the pattern of the evidence, because the same proportions, the same descriptions of scale, the same language of forests that create their own climates and define the landscape, rather than simply occupying it, appear across sources that had no connection to each other. Dutch mapmakers, Persian scholars, Chinese chroniclers, indigenous oral traditions from the territories themselves, across languages, across centuries, across traditions that had absolutely no reason to coordinate a shared exaggeration, the same picture emerges. Something was there, something large enough to be unmistakable, something that everyone who encountered it tried, in their own language and within their own framework of understanding,
a little bit.
To describe as accurately as they could. And then something happened to it. This is where the timeline becomes genuinely strange, and this is where the story stops being a curiosity and starts being a question that deserves a serious answer. In the early 17th century, references to the great forests of the Tartarian territories appear in travel accounts and geographic records almost routinely. The forests are mentioned the way any landmark would be mentioned, as navigational features, as climate zones, as regions with their own distinct character that a traveller crossing them needed to prepare for. By the mid-18th century, those references begin to thin. Not dramatically at first, but noticeably, the way a sound fades when you are not sure exactly.
We can go down and see the cedar of Lebanon. Let me see. I'm absolutely down with that. Majestic, good call. Cedar of Lebanon. All right, there we go. Let's get down in there and see if we can see the cedars. Oh. Oh my. What a view. Even up here in the forest, what a view. Oh. Yeah, it says there, like, cedars of Lebanon are 70 to 130 foot. And a redwood tree is about 300 foot. So yeah, that's huge too. These cedars are huge. So that's pretty cool.
Exactly when it stopped. By the 19th century, the great forests are essentially absent from the record,
redwood forest in
and the absence
China
is not the kind
too.
of gradual fading you would expect from ordinary deforestation. Ordinary deforestation leaves traces. It leaves the records of the timber trade, the ledgers of the logging companies, the maps showing...
It's kind of cool to think about, but like North America, North America and China have a lot of the same ecology because at one point in time they were sort of connected. That's why like alligators are in North America and China, and that's why redwood. And it was like, I want to say it's the Triassic is when they separated. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was like the Triassic or even earlier than that. But I think it was the Triassic. But yeah, alligators. That's why they live in China and North America and nowhere else. Redwoods, that's why they're in China and North America. There's also freshwater sturgeons that are... Yeah, so there's a paddlefish. Regardless, there's so many species that are like... that show that those lands were once one, and redwoods are one of those species.
And cleared for agriculture. The complaints of local populations who lost resources they depended on, the administrative records of the operations that cleared the land. None of that appears in the Tartarian record, at least not in the way it should.
Exactly, Baba Yaga. Yeah, they had the giant trees in Russia that... What were those trees? What species? Caucasus fir? Siberian pines and the taiga. That's what I think of when I think of giant Russian trees. There's those giant Siberian pines. I don't know if there's a big one we can see. Boom, 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 boom. I'm trying to find a good picture of them. Hold on. They don't look all that big. They are big. But... It's not a good picture that shows you a good... It'll show you a good scale. It's got stuff like this. I mean, okay, but... Doesn't really tell you how big it is, but they're huge.
If what happened was simply commercial land clearance on a large scale, what appears instead are accounts of expeditions that travelled enormous distances to reach specific groves, that targeted the oldest and largest trees first, while leaving younger growth untouched, that worked intensively and then disappeared without...
That's just forestry. Yeah, they target the older trees and let the younger trees stay so they can grow. What's weird about that?
Leaving the kind of paper trail that legitimate commercial ventures invariably generate. No ledgers, no company records, no destination manifests for the timber harvested, and in many cases, even the stumps, those enormous, undeniable, impossible to ignore stumps that should have been left behind as evidence of what had stood there, were eventually burned or buried. The landscape was cleared not just of the trees, but of the memory of the trees. The land was made to look as though...
I actually learned a secret to get rid of stumps, because we had a tree that died in our yard, and there was it left a big old stump. If you pack manure around the stump, and you can plant flowers and stuff on it too, like as a mound, make it like a mound flower bed. That stump will decay within within a couple of years. Whereas if you just leave the stump exposed, just sitting there, it could take decades for it to decay. So if you pack manure around it and plant stuff on top of it and get an ecosystem going on it, the organisms that thrive in that ecosystem are going to start using the resources of the stump in their own, mostly the cellulose and stuff, in their own biology. So it'll help break that down.
Nothing extraordinary had ever grown there. And this is the point in this story where I want to pause and ask you something directly. If you are finding this video valuable, if this kind of inquiry into what the historical record actually says, as opposed to what we have been told it says, is something that matters to you, please subscribe to this channel. It costs you nothing, and it means that content like this can keep being made. Now,
and Deviant says, nah, they're about the Lebanon cedar. No, they're still around. They can reach around 40 meters high and 2 meters width, whatever that is in weird country measurements. 20 foot diameter. Yeah, Deviant did some calculations. 130 foot tall and 8 feet wide. That's about the height of a 12-story building, yeah.
Back to the question that I think is the most important one in this entire story. Why burn a stump? A stump is not in the way of anything. A stump does not prevent farming. A stump does not block a road or obstruct a settlement. A stump, especially one
Stump can do all those things. Absolutely. You've never had a stump in your yard that you had to work around?
Extraordinary size is more useful left standing than destroyed. It becomes a landmark. It generates stories. It draws travelers. It becomes part of the living memory of a place. The only reason to burn a stump, to go to the considerable effort and expense of destroying something that poses no practical obstacle, is if the stump itself is the problem. If the stump, simply by existing, tells a story that someone has decided should not be told. A stump of that magnitude, a stump requiring 20 men with their arms outstretched to encircle, is not just a piece of wood. It is evidence. It is an argument that cannot be edited, cannot be mistranslated, cannot be locked in an archive. It stands in the open air and it says without words that something about the world was fundamentally different from the world you are being told existed.
This tree right here does not look exceptionally large. I mean, it's a large tree, but like, does that look huge, like giant tree to you guys?
And if you are in the business of reorganizing history, of reshaping the past into a form that makes the present seem like the only possible outcome of human development, that stump is the most inconvenient witness you can imagine. Now here is where the story becomes more layered, because the indigenous peoples of the Tartarian territories did not describe the forests the way the European travelers did. The European travelers reached for architectural language. They described the trees in terms of cathedrals and monuments and pillars of stone, because those were the largest things their mental frameworks contained. They translated the natural world into the built world, because that was the only vocabulary they had for something of that scale.
I mean, that does look huge. There's a train engine. That's a big ass tree. But that's like, again, we're talking about a tree that's about the size of, redwoods and sequoias that we have now.
The indigenous accounts describe something structurally different. They describe the forests not as collections of very large individual organisms, but as a single integrated system. A network of living beings so deeply interconnected through the ground beneath them that the network itself functioned as something more like a single vast organism than...
That is the mycelial network. I don't know if there's I mean, I'd love to see your citations on where the indigenous people were familiar with the mycelial network. But yeah, that's a real thing. Forests really are like that. They are all interlocked organisms.
Like a forest of separate trees. They describe the forests as having awareness, not in a mystical sense, but in a biological sense, a systemic sense. When one of the great trees was cut, the surrounding forest responded. Moisture levels in the air shifted. Animal behavior changed. A low vibration moved through the ground for miles in every direction, as though the root network was transmitting information about the damage the way a nervous system transmits information about an injury. This sounds extraordinary. It would have sounded entirely fantastical 20 years ago. But modern science has since documented something that makes these accounts considerably less easy to dismiss. We know now, with reasonable scientific certainty, that forests communicate through underground fungal networks. We know that trees respond to damage in their neighbors by changing their own
Yeah, that's mycelium. It's like a fungal web of neurons that connect all the different plants and other fungi together as a cohesive unit.
Chemical outputs. We know that old-growth forests operate as integrated biological systems in ways that individual trees or young forests simply do not. What the indigenous accounts of the Tartarian territories describe is an extension of these documented phenomena, an extension so far beyond what survives in modern forests that it can only be explained by organisms of extraordinary age and size. Trees so old, root systems so vast and so deeply interwoven over so many centuries, that the network they formed had crossed a threshold from interconnection into something that functioned like collective biological intelligence. Remove enough of those trees and you do not simply clear a forest. You destroy a planetary system.
You destroy an ecosystem. That's not wrong. It's just attaching all this other nonsense to it is not the great the great way to spread awareness about the destruction of the primeval forest that we experienced over the last 300 or 400 years. Let me see here. The General Sherman tree is the world's largest known single stem tree by volume. A giant sequoia, Dendron giganteum, which means literally giant sequoia tree. It stands about 275 feet tall with a base diameter of over 36 feet. The redwood, and how you spell those other ones starting with a S, that I've seen have been huge, just like the ones seen in the video. Yeah, these ones shown in the video are not these are not supernaturally big. He keeps talking like they are, but they're not. They're as big as the ones that like General Sherman, smaller than General Sherman, really. The General Sherman tree is the world's largest known. Okay, that was said twice. It looks like located in Sequoia National Park, California. It is estimated to be over 2,000 years old. Good morning. Sorry I'm late, says a goddess. Nope. You get on the flogging table, Ryan. You know the rules. You need to be flogged.
The historical record, read carefully, suggests that is exactly what happened. The environmental consequences that follow the disappearance of the Great Tartarian forests in the documentary record are immediate and severe. Rivers that were described as navigable become erratic and unpredictable. Climates that were recorded as mild and agriculturally productive shift toward harsh and unreliable. Springs disappear. Soils that had supported dense populations for...
So, the best way to remember it is C, koi, yeah. So, it'd be more like C, koi, yeah. Flog me like one of your French girls. Oh boy. I have all the implements of flogging, so you get to choose.
Generations thin and fail. The land without the giants becomes a different land entirely, less stable, less alive, less capable of sustaining the civilization that had existed within it. The indigenous traditions said this would happen. Their warnings appear in the older records, fragmented and imperfectly translated by scribes who did not understand what they were transcribing, filtered through the same archival disruptions that erase so much else from this period. But the core of the message survived.
I wonder how many people got mushed doing these types of photo shoots, though. Like, where the trees, like, all just decides to go and just mash all these men into, like I guess what the British would call a pudding. Because I was watching Ben's last night, and they were having a discussion about pudding, and GE was talking about how pudding was like vanilla or chocolate. It comes in little plastic cups, and Phoebe was talking about how pudding is meat and other ingredients mashed together. So,
Elders and the land forgets what it was. We should sit with that for a moment, because it is not simply a poetic statement about ecology. It is a description of a mechanism, a specific claim that the biological memory of a landscape, its capacity to maintain the conditions that made it productive and stable, resided in the oldest and largest organisms within it. Destroy those organisms, and you do not just change the landscape. You delete the landscape's ability to remember what it was and return to it. The world we are describing here is not a mythological world. It is not Atlantis.
It's absolutely
not. It is
not
not a civilization that appears only...
What the world you're describing here is primeval Earth. Before industrialization, but more so. Okay, so it's graded, right? Okay, so the first problem was out of Africa. We came out of Africa, right, and we spread around the world, and we killed all the megafauna. Now, a healthy ecology needs megafauna to be healthy. We don't live. There's no continental biome that's actually healthy now, and it hasn't been for almost 2,000 years, because we've killed all the continental megafauna with the exceptions of sub-Saharan Africa and the Indian subcontinent, where they still have very, very highly endangered vestiges of their megafauna. So megafauna is required for a healthy environment because they process through the foliage and return the nutrients back to the earth. Without them, the ecology struggles. That's just a fact of nature, right? So humans spreading out of Africa, immediately we become a problem because we wipe out all the megafauna. Okay, and then once we wipe out all the megafauna, we still got to eat, so we're going to clear all the land for farms and stuff. So a lot of the natural ecosystems there were destroyed. But then the lumber industry came along, and escalated that even further. The age of exploration, when we're building millions of huge ships to explore the world on both sides of the Eurasian continent, and in Africa too. They're harvesting forest at an unprecedented rate, and expanding and building roads and bridges, right? And using all this lumber, and then we hit the Industrial Revolution, where when it first kicked off, wood fires were what fueled the furnaces of industry before coal, and then fossil fuels took over. And if we hadn't depleted our supply of force, we might have continued that. So so we've decimated these natural ecosystems. There's no continental ecosystem that's healthy right now. They're all like in a post-apocalyptic state from an Anthropocene extinction event that we're still currently living through, right? Which comes in waves, destroying this and then that, and slowly just picking away at it. They killed the bison herds are a great example, but way before that, before the Europeans came in and wiped out the bisons, the indigenous people, or what we call indigenous people, arrived over the Bering Land Bridge and killed all the megafauna, like thousands of years before the European settlers came and finished off, or tried to finish off the buffalo, which were sort of the last megafauna. And buffalo are only megafauna by our current standards, which is again post-apocalyptic. So, kill enough organisms off, and a rat becomes megafauna by comparison. So buffalo, bison are just megafauna by comparison. There were even bigger bison longifront, bigger bison, Ice Age bison, that were even bigger and more powerful. And obviously mammoths and camels and all sorts of giant animals. But those were long gone. Those have been long gone for a long time, as humans spread across the face of the planet.
In legend, and leaves nothing behind. The evidence for it sits in archives that are accessible, in map collections that scholars visit, in travel accounts that have been catalogued and partially digitized, in geological surveys whose data, examined from the right angle, tells a story of environmental change so sudden and so comprehensive that ordinary explanations struggle to account for it. What has not happened, at least not in any mainstream academic context, is the assembling of this evidence into a single coherent picture, and the asking of the question that the picture demands. What was the world before the giants were removed? And who decided they needed to go? Those are not small questions. They reach into the foundations of how we...
Healthier. The planet was healthier. We had a better system of... Gaia was breeding better, I guess is what you say. Because if you think about Gaia as an entity, as an overarching entity of the planet, the greenery would be like her lungs, right? And slowly hacking away at those and destroying the biggest parts of it. Not going to be beneficial to the ecosystem at all.
Understand human history, the relationship between civilization and the natural environment, and the mechanisms by which that relationship can be deliberately disrupted, and the memory of it deliberately erased. They suggest a version of the past in which the stakes of ecological destruction were understood by at least some of the people doing the destroying, and in which the decision to proceed anyway was made with full awareness of what would be lost.
These trees aren't not even exceptionally wide. There's trees, I could go outside and find a tree this big, and I'm in the desert.
You will not find this conversation in any standard textbook. You will not find it in any approved curriculum. The silence of official history on a subject this significant is itself a kind of evidence, not proof of a conspiracy in the dramatic sense, but proof that the questions have not been taken seriously in the places where serious questions are supposed to be examined. But the questions remain, and the evidence, scattered, fragmented, and deliberately obscured as it may be, remains with them, somewhere beneath...
colloquial and sequoia have a lot of the same phonetical sounds. Sequoia, colloquial, yeah.
The ordinary forests of the modern world, beneath the sediment and the centuries and the carefully managed memory of what this planet used to support, the roots of something vast are still there, still connected, still waiting for someone to ask what they remember.
Oh, and then we're gonna do we got more Tartaria trees. Don't you worry. Don't go anywhere. We're still... I imagine we're going to get a lot of the same pictures, though. But these are not mountain-sized trees. Some of them are literally just barely large.
If you were standing in a redwood forest today, you would feel something most people cannot name. Not peace, not beauty. Something older than that. A presence. The canopy disappears into fog. The trunks rise like columns from another era. And somewhere in the back
Someday I will go to the redwood forest, or the sequoia forest, someday.
Of your mind, a question forms that the tour guides never answer. Are these really the largest trees that ever grew here? Or are they what is left? That question sounds simple, but once you start pulling at it...
Oh, they're definitely what is left. I don't doubt that at all. I believe there were, yeah, giant trees for thousands of years that were bigger than like General Sherman that we have now. There's no doubt in my mind that there were trees bigger than Sherman.
It does not let go easily. Most people learn about redwoods the same way. A school trip, a nature documentary, a photograph of someone standing at the base of a trunk, arms stretched wide, not even close to reaching its edges. And the lesson is always the same. These are the largest living things on Earth. These are nature at its most extreme. This is as big as trees get. But that lesson carries a silent assumption inside it. That what survives today represents the ceiling, that the tallest standing redwood...
I don't know if that's ever been the assumption. I mean, we can't be sure which ones of these trees were bigger than Sherman now. But, you know, we can guesstimate heights based on other factors. And yeah, I don't doubt for a second that there's trees bigger than the ones that last today. Absolutely. I don't think that Sherman's the ceiling.
Tells us everything about what redwoods were once capable of. And when you begin pulling that assumption apart, something underneath it shifts in a way that is difficult to ignore. If you are new here, welcome to the channel, where we dive into history and uncover what has been lost to time.
That's wild. That's like Aunt Jer says, I took someone from Ohio to Mount Rainier. As we were driving through the forest, she got claustrophobic and started having a panic attack. All I could do was just keep driving in order to get it out. That is one of those primeval forest areas too, the rainforest and stuff up in the Cascades. They got huge trees up there too. I love how everything up there is covered with that moss though.
Content like this interests you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Now let us get into the video. There is a category of accounts, photographs and journal entries from the 1800s that describe trees the modern redwoods simply do not match. Not by a small margin, by a significant one. Trees whose stumps were wide enough to build structures on. Trunks that rose without tapering for distances that defied what modern biology expects.
I've heard that about Hyperion too.
Crowns that vanished not into the visible canopy, but into a ceiling of mist so high that the tree itself seemed to dissolve entirely before reaching its top. These were not the accounts of dreamers or poets. They were written by surveyors, engineers, loggers.
I would love to climb one.
Men who worked in those forests every single day and still found themselves reaching for language that did not fit. Walls, columns, cathedrals. Architecture. That word keeps reappearing in their journals. Architecture. Not because the men were being romantic, because the scale they were looking at did not register as natural. It registered as constructed. The photographs that survived from the early logging era...
Well, I mean, the logs that they were using these for were for architecture, right? The timber that they were collecting. So they wanted trees that had good architecture, that had good straight, not a lot of wiggle to them and stuff.
The journal's harder to dismiss. In some images, 10 men standing with their arms linked cannot span the width of a single cut stump. Wagons are parked on top of felled trunks like toys placed on a dining table. Horses appear reduced. Tools look decorative rather than functional. And researchers who have studied the proportions of these images carefully point out something important. The measurements of the men, the tools, the wagons, all confirm normal human scale, which means the trees were exactly as large as they appear, not exaggerated, not staged, exactly as recorded.
And well, show me some that are exceptional.
This is where the Tartaria question enters the conversation. For those unfamiliar, Tartaria refers to a broad and contested body of alternative history research. At its core, it suggests that before the world we inherited, there existed civilizations of considerable sophistication, whose physical remnants were either destroyed, repurposed, or quietly absorbed into the official historical record. The mud flood theory, the reset narrative, the idea
obviously people that have been coming to the Hive long enough know all about Tartaria and our Cabbage Patch Kids and our orphan trains and our mud floods and digging out big cities.
Certain structures and features we attribute
cut the
to
biggest
one
ones
era
first. They
were
really
actually
did.
products of a much older one. Most academic historians dismiss this body of research.
That's the problem with humans in general. That's when we kill the megafauna, when we destroy destroyed the trees. It was always the largest first, whereas every other carnivore goes after the weak and infirm, except for us. We go after the highest quality.
Entirely. And for many of the more extreme claims attached to it, that dismissal is warranted. But buried inside the broader Tartaria conversation is a more specific and more difficult question. One that does not require accepting conspiracies or wholesale revision of the textbooks. It simply asks, what if certain natural features of the pre-industrial world, including its forests, were far larger than what we see today? And what if their disappearance was not gradual, as natural decline tends to be, but sudden, targeted, and coordinated? Because the timeline of the logging era is the part that does not sit quietly once you examine it closely.
Yeah, we take the top-notch stuff where every other organism culls the bottom layer.
Closely. California's oldest and largest forests were not thinned slowly over centuries. Within a single human generation, from roughly 1850 to 1890, the most ancient groves in the state were reduced to fields of enormous stumps. Trees that had stood for thousands of years were gone before serious scientific documentation had even begun.
There's General
No
Sherman.
preserved specimens, no detailed biological studies, no protected groves set aside specifically for the largest examples. They were gone before the questions could be asked.
Mm-hmm.
And the lumberjacks who did the cutting did not behave like men simply clearing timber for economic gain. Multiple journals from different camps in different counties across different years describe the same anomaly. The oldest trees were targeted first.
Right.
The most remote and difficult groves were accessed early before the closer, younger, and far more economic.
The bigger, older ones are going to produce more timber for your labor. That's it's not that complicated. I mean, it's sad. I wish we didn't do it, but it's not like that doesn't like prove a conspiracy or anything.
Practical forest nearby. Companies moved entire crews into valleys with no rail access, no nearby rivers for floating logs, no obvious route to market. Operations that made no financial sense to the men actually doing the work. Several wrote plainly that they did not understand the logic, that the goal seemed less like harvesting timber and more like removing something, less like industry, more like erasure. If you place that...
Show me any men saying this. That's just your claim, right? You're like, oh, men were saying this, and they thought that they were doing this and that, and yeah, I don't... You don't have to be understand the economics of the timber industry to be a lumberjack, I guess is the thing, though. I mean, I'm sure that lumberjacks, for the most part, would understand more than most people, but and maybe they would know, like, oh, this is a stupid idea to clear this section so far from rails and rivers, but they were after that precious giant wood. Like, it could be used for so many things that there's just no substitute for a solid, strong support beam like made out of a redwood. Yeah.
Observation inside the Tartaria framework, a framework that argues certain physical remnants of an older world were deliberately cleared to make room for the narrative of a new one. The behavior of those early logging companies starts to look less like capitalism and more like a campaign, not because of secret societies or shadowy organizations, but because when something enormous exists that does not fit the accepted story of the world, the simplest solution is not to explain it. It is to remove it before it requires an explanation at all.
That's not why, though. We just removed we removed the big things because big things take a long time to grow and reproduce slowly, and we are destructive, and we want the big things. We want to eat them, and we want to use them, and we want to harvest them, and it's a signal to our prowess as a species that we can conquer all these big giant things. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Fun fact: I have my provincial silviculture surveyor certification. It's expired, but I passed the course, which is fucking hard. Ooh, I didn't know you were into forestry, Cap. If I come to Canada, you gotta take me out into the woods and show me some cool Canadian forest stuff. I would love that.
Cool. Before you scroll past this, if you are finding this video valuable, please consider subscribing. It genuinely helps this channel continue bringing you content that does not appear in the mainstream conversation. Now here is where the story becomes almost impossible to set aside. Some Tartaria researchers point to a pattern of consistency that goes well beyond the trees themselves. Across different regions of the world, in different eras, there are accounts of organisms and structures at a scale that modern science struggles to fit into its current models. Giant trees in Siberia, ancient stumps in the American Midwest that predate any known logging era, photographs from the 1800s in multiple continents
showing me the thing you're saying is real.
So wide they dwarf the settlements built around them, and in each case the same narrative pattern. The accounts are fragmentary.
This is like many people are saying, but it's from a long time ago, and you're not even showing me. Oh yeah, in the in the book Exploration of the Untamed West by Terry Hamilton, the explorer Roger Marshall wrote this paragraph about it. You're not showing me that. I want to see that. I want to see the excerpts that you're claiming exist of these people saying these things about these trees.
Physical evidence is gone or scattered. The academic literature is thin, and the question itself is rarely taken seriously enough to investigate properly. Tartaria researchers argue this is not coincidence. It is the shape of a deliberate historical clearing, not just of the physical objects, but of the cultural memory attached to them. The indigenous peoples of California did not need journals or photographs to know that the land had changed. Their oral histories describe the giants as stabilizers, not symbols, not mythological figures, physical anchors of the environment itself, roots that ran deep enough to hold entire hillsides in place, canopies wide enough to generate their own local rainfall. Organisms old enough to have existed before any human memory of California began, and their accounts describe the same sequence. The giants fell, and then the land responded in ways that surprised even the settlers who had caused the clear.
Yeah, I do, and again, I'm absolutely 100% agree that there were acres and acres and acres of giant sequoias that were the size of General Sherman that once dominated the landscape of California, of the coastal California, of Northern California, where it's all foggy because they have to have that certain type of environment. That they were just, yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were other massive trees that in the American West that did get. I mean, oak trees get huge, just for example. And we have destroyed. I no doubt at all in my mind at all that humans have killed the biggest members of multiple species of trees without ever documenting their size. I don't doubt that for a second. But there's some kind of conspiracy to cover them up. It's nuts.
Rivers that had run steady for generations began to flood and collapse. Springs that had never failed went dry within years. Hillsides that had been stable for longer than anyone could remember began to slide and erode.
And this kind of reminds me of what happens when at Yellowstone, when all the wolves were killed off. But then they return the wolves back, and it like you can see the landscape change just based on their presence. It's amazing. Okay, I think that's the right one. Yeah. All right.
Valleys filled with sediment. The newspapers blamed poor planning. Officials blamed inexperienced settlement. But the people closest to the forests described...
It is all of that stuff. It's poor planning, poor ecology management, poor land management. My mom actually works for the soil and water conservation, so I kind of grew up with this stuff where she would help them like chart out the best place to put in a pond, or regions where they can clear this for wetland and stuff like that. Just because wetlands are so important for filtering fresh water, and humans are so stupid that we absolutely hate wetlands. Any place where there's wetlands, we build over them, we destroy them, we drain them. I don't obviously that because there are things about wetlands that you can't really build in them. Mosquitoes and venomous snakes and all sorts of stuff, but they're so important ecologically especially to birds. So here in BC, we have developed this very cool system called biogeoclimatic zoning, by which we can accurately predict with high level of accuracy individual species performance just based on geography and vegetation. When I was doing my training, I used to take Dagon everywhere. That's so cool.
Something simpler and more direct. The land behaved differently without the giants. Modern ecology does not fully disagree. Large old trees regulate local hydrology in ways that smaller, younger forests simply cannot replicate. Their root systems stabilize slopes at depths and widths that younger trees never reach. Their canopies slow the movement of storms across landscapes. Their mass stores and releases moisture in cycles that moderate temperature for everything living beneath them. Remove them quickly from a region, and the environmental shock is not subtle.
Right, it's like a whole ecosystem that depends on these big fog-sucking monsters.
Seismic. Now imagine trees not merely large, but orders of magnitude larger than anything alive today. Trees whose roots ran not feet, but dozens of feet into the...
Yeah, when you lose the apex predator, the larger carnivores, the larger herbivores overconsume the vegetation, which then destroys the smaller species that depend on the plants. Save the wolves. Exactly. I also got to carry and use a chainsaw, which was fucking awesome. Hell yeah. The Kip Davis Chainsaw Massacre.
Earth. Trees whose canopies covered not acres, but the breadth of whole valleys. Remove those organisms within a single generation. The environmental disruption would not be a footnote in the history of California development. It would reshape the continent, and yet it barely appears in the official account of what happened.
It did reshape the environment, but the impact of it was echoed so far out that people at this time didn't know. There was also industrialization going on at this time, where we were pumping the smoke from fossil fuels into the air and dumping chemical waste into the waters, and we didn't know. As a species, we didn't know the long-term effects. Until about 300 years ago, the concept of anything going extinct was ludicrous, right? Like, no, species can't go extinct.
To the American West. Some researchers in this space also raise the biological question that the Tartaria framework makes more urgent. What kind of environment produces life at that scale? Because size in biology is not arbitrary. It reflects conditions, air density, oxygen concentration.
This is all true stuff that you're saying right now.
Soil composition, climate stability sustained over centuries without interruption. If trees of this magnitude truly covered California into the 1800s, The environment that produced them was operating under different parameters than what exists today. Parameters that no longer exist. And that raises a question.
Right, and people don't like to acknowledge that we're in a post-cataclysmic ecology on all continental land masses right now. I mean, in some places, like I said, the Indian subcontinent and sub-Saharan Africa are still in the midst of this extinction event. Like, it's still ongoing there. But for the most part, North America was we completely decimated our natural ecology to the point where it's just in a post-apocalyptic state. I would say no later than the 1960s. But yeah.
Nobody in mainstream science is eager to sit with for very long. Did those parameters disappear naturally, or were they removed along with everything else that reflected them? The Tartaria hypothesis, in its most careful form...
Okay, the hypothesis is not the right word there, champ. The Tartaria conspiracy is probably a better idea.
...does not require monsters or villains. It requires only this, that the world which came before the industrial era was physically larger in certain respects, that the transition between that world and this one was faster and more complete than official history acknowledges.
That second part's where I'm drawing my line in the sand, actually, because we started doing this 200,000 years ago. So from 200,000 years ago until now, that's 200,000 year long period. I wouldn't call it sudden. It did. The rate at which we reap the resources of the world and drive things into extinction is definitely accelerating, but I don't think it's like all of a sudden snap, they're all gone. It happened over thousands of years. In North America, over thousands of years, from when the indigenous folks showed up around 30,000 to 45,000 years ago, right up into modern time. We've been slowly picking away at the natural ecosystems of the planet, of the regions.
And that the people who managed that transition had reasons, whatever they were, to prefer that the previous scale not be remembered, studied, or preserved. The redwoods we stand beneath today are magnificent. They are among the most extraordinary organisms on this planet. But the photograph evidence, the journal accounts, and the environmental record from the 1850s and 1860s suggests that what we are looking at today is not the original forest. It is what survived the removal of something far greater. What we call nature at its most extreme may
That is true, yes.
be a second version of the world.
No conspiracy needed, though. It's just industrialization and deforestation. It's not no big conspiracy to hide some secret giants in the past. It was just that, just plain and simple capitalism.
A quieter version, a smaller one, and the stumps are still out there in some places. Wide as small houses, ancient enough to make the oldest living trees look young, silent as evidence that has never been adequately questioned. The question this channel wants to leave you with is not whether Tartaria was a real civilization in the formal historical sense. That debate is larger and older than any single video can resolve. The question is this: what if the redwoods we visit today are not nature at its most powerful, but the
I don't think anybody claims that these are nature at its most powerful, though. That's the problem.
survivors of something we cleared before we thought to ask what it was? What if the giants were not an anomaly at the edge of biological possibility, but the original condition of an older Earth? And what if the world we inherited...
A tree can survive that, but not, what's the word I'm looking for? Not permanently. It's going to shorten that tree's lifespan, and eventually it's going to be its downfall to cut a hole through it like that.
It is not the natural world in its fullness, but a diminished version of it, reshaped quietly, rapidly, and almost completely.
Oh my gosh, exactly, Miranda. Why do people make up shadowy, hidden organizations to be mad at? Just be mad at the ones that are in plain sight. Exactly. There doesn't need to be some conspiracy about the deforestation of the American West. You can just be mad about that. At the same time, I prepped and recorded a course for MVP and have been doing so ever since. I'm talking about working in the forestry stuff. Okay.
Completely within a single human lifetime. The stumps hold the answer. We just stopped looking at them. If this video made you think differently about the forests around you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you have not already, and stay with us.
Here's the newest. The latest. Just from yesterday. Gotta speed it up though, because we're running out of time. And yes, I'm sending y'all over to Ben's after this, so stick around here. Don't leave. I want y'all to hang out here when this segment ends here in 15-20 minutes. And I'm going to shuttle everybody over there as a group so we can do a big hive raid for Ben, okay? So don't go anywhere. Don't leave this chat. Well, please don't. I mean, obviously I can't control what you do. You do what you want. But if you would stay here while I transfer you over, we're trying to keep this thing moving, to keep the train moving.
There is a question that serious historians do not ask. Not because they have answered it, not because the evidence is too thin to pursue, but because the evidence is exactly thick enough to be dangerous. You have heard the name Tartaria.
And say again, who really cut them down? Why does it need to be some kind of shadowy cabal, right? Why do we have to have a damn conspiracy theory about what's clear?
I've seen it on the old maps, written in careful ink across territories so vast they swallow modern nations whole, stretching from the eastern edges of Europe across the breadth of Asia into lands that no living cartographer has ever walked. A name that appears in hundreds of European records, encyclopedias, diplomatic correspondences, trade documents, and then, with a quietness that feels almost deliberate, disappears. But this video is not about the maps. This video is about what grew there, what was taken, and most importantly, who had both the reach and the reason to take it. If you're new here, welcome to the channel, where we dive into history and uncover what has been lost to time. If content like this interests you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Now let's get into the video.
What if I offer you a juice box, Aunt Jer? Would a juice box change your opinion?
If you go back far enough into the oldest surviving illustrations of the Tartarian lands, the ones produced before the great reorganization of historical memory that swept through the 18th and 19th centuries, you will notice something that no one in your education ever pointed you toward. Not the architecture, though the architecture deserves its own conversation. Not the cities, not the roads, not the peoples described in precise Latin annotations along the margins of the page. You will notice the trees. They rise behind every city, every river crossing, every caravan route in these illustrations.
And again, he's referring to art of the giant trees in the background.
Not as decorative background flourishes, not as artistic padding in the margins of a composition, but as central features of the landscape, drawn with the same careful proportional attention given to everything else in the image. The horses...
Show me these pictures that you claim exist. All you're showing me is logging photos.
The horse-sized. The men are man-sized. The buildings are building-sized. And the trees are the size of mountains. Now before that registers as medieval artistic incompetence or simple exaggeration. Hold on, because the same proportions...
I just want you to show them to me, that's all.
...appear across sources that had no connection to one another. Dutch mapmakers who never met Persian scholars, who never met Chinese chroniclers, who never met Russian expedition writers. Across languages, across centuries, across entirely separate cartographic traditions that had no reason to coordinate a shared fiction. The same image repeats with a consistency that deserves serious attention. Forests of living towers, canopies measured not in feet but in acres, root systems that reshaped the geography around them. Something was there, and then it was not. And the transition between those two states is where this story truly begins. The geological record gives us a starting point.
Yeah, but you got a conspiracy about it, and I think it just is what happens when humans expand, and it's gross, and I don't like it, but it is in fact what's happening.
That mainstream science is entirely comfortable with, up to a certain point. The Carboniferous period, roughly 300 million years ago, produced forests of organisms so large that the word tree barely covers them. Lycopsid trees reaching 30 meters, horsetail species thicker than modern trucks, a biological world operating at a scale that the Earth today simply does not sustain.
And then there was the Carboniferous rainforest collapse, in which all those, and I don't know that any of them were bigger than the organisms we have today, but any of the plants were, the insects and arthropods were. But then there was the rainforest collapse because there was nothing to coal back at the time, nothing to coal back the vascular plants from just sucking all the oxygen out of, sucking all the carbon monoxide out of the atmosphere. I got that backwards. Sucking all the oxygen out of the, no, I had it right. Sucking all the carbon monoxide out of the atmosphere, and overloading it with oxygen, causing it to collapse. So, we don't want that.
Standard explanation is that conditions changed. Atmospheric composition shifted, oxygen levels dropped, the biological niches that supported megaflora collapsed, and the giants passed into the fossil record. That explanation satisfies most people because it places the giants safely in the deep past. Ancient, irrelevant?
No, I don't know if anybody's saying that the vascular plants of the Carboniferous were bigger than... I don't know of any of them that were bigger than the plants and stuff we have today.
Disconnected from anything that might threaten the coherence of recorded history. But here is the problem. The records we are discussing are not 300 million years old. The illustrations with their mountain-sized trees, the travel accounts describing forests where direct sunlight never reached the ground, the indigenous oral traditions speaking of organisms so integrated with the land that they functioned as a planetary nervous system, these are not fossils. These are documents produced within the last 1,000 years.
That's just mycelia, yeah.
Within the last 500. Some within living memory of people whose grandchildren wrote the records we still have. The megaflora of Tartaria, if the evidence is taken seriously...
You mean grandparents wrote the records?
...was not a relic of a prehistoric world. It was alive. It was recent. And that changes everything. The diaries of European travellers who crossed into the Tartarian interior in the 16th and 17th centuries share a quality that you do not find in ordinary travel writing. They reach for language and find it insufficient. One German expedition writer describes riding for 3 days beneath a continuous canopy and never once seeing the sky, the light...
That reminds me of the chapter when they're in the Mirkwoods in The Hobbit. But that's how things were before we destroyed all the forests, so yeah.
Arriving instead through the leaves in long, slow columns, thick with moisture, warm with an organic heat that he compared to the interior of a cathedral, though he noted immediately that no cathedral he had ever entered felt alive the way this did. He did not write that the trees were large, he wrote that the trees were the world, a French diplomat crossing the same territories a generation later, that the locals treated as almost incidental. An English merchant who joined a trade expedition into the interior of what the maps labelled as Greater Tartary, writes about the sound the forests made at night, a low resonance in the ground, felt through the body rather than heard through the ears, as if the earth itself were breathing. These writers were not poets, they were merchants and diplomats and soldiers, men whose professional survival depended on accurate observation and clear reporting. When they struggle for language, it is not because they are being dramatic. It is because what they encountered genuinely exceeded the categories available to them. Now let us talk about what the people who actually lived within these forests understood about them, because this is where the story becomes something far more remarkable than a record of large trees. The indigenous peoples of the Tartarian territories, the communities whose oral tradition...
Oh, there were giant people too, like Paul Bunyan, who was the lumberjack that is famously instrumental in clearing the forests of North America.
Survived at least partially through the great disruptions.
But we do have videos about giants that we've covered in the past. Let me see, giant. Yeah, here's one about biblical giants. So if you're into that, you can go check this out after this is over. Oh, there we go.
The 18th and 19th centuries do not describe the forests the way the European travellers did. The Europeans reached for scale. They counted trunk widths and canopy acres, and days of travel beneath continuous cover. The indigenous accounts describe something...
Yeah, for real, I'm a vagabond and I'm a poet, so anybody can be a poet.
...different in kind. Not just degree. They describe the forests as a single living system, not a collection of large trees growing in proximity, but an integrated organism of continental scale, one whose components, the individual trees, communicated through the ground itself.
Mycelium.
Responded collectively to damage, maintained the moisture and temperature and soil conditions of entire regions through a biological cooperation so complex and so ancient that it operated more like a mind than like a forest.
Then this is true. That's what, the mycelial network is.
They say the great trees knew when they were being harmed, not in the metaphorical sense that gets dismissed as animism or naive personification, in a functional, systemic sense. When one of the elders was cut, the surrounding forest responded. The air changed. Animals moved differently. The ground vibrated at a frequency that could be felt from...
The ecology is going to act different when you take out a member of its megaflora.
...miles in every direction, as if information about the damage was being transmitted outward through the root network. And here is the thing. Modern science has caught up to part of this. We know now that forests communicate through underground mycorrhizal fungal networks. We know that trees release chemical signals when damaged.
Yeah, mycorrhizal... When you include the mycorrhizal, it adds in the root systems of plants to the mycelial network. So it's just those systems combined.
That neighboring trees respond to by increasing their own defenses.
But there's also, that's just what's under the soil. There's also signals sent out from, airborne signals too, to the rest of the forest about what's happening. I don't call them pheromones because it's plants, but yeah, there's hormonal signals and things that are released into the environment, both chemically through the air and with electrical impulses through the root systems. So yeah, it's a full thing.
We know that old-growth forests function as integrated biological systems in ways that young or fragmented forests simply do not. But the indigenous accounts of the Tartarian forests describe a level of integration that goes beyond anything science has documented in surviving forests. They describe organisms so old and so large that their root systems have had millennia rather than centuries to weave together, creating a network so deep and so extensive that it connected not just tree to tree, but forest to water table to river system to regional climate. Remove enough of those connections and you do not clear a forest.
I'm agreeing with all this stuff and still not seeing your conspiracy theories or the need for your conspiracy theory.
You sever a planetary system. And before we go any further, if you are finding this video valuable, leave a comment below telling us what's in the historical record is not gradual. It does not unfold over the slow centuries that ordinary deforestation would require. It is sudden, and it is severe, and it happens in a way that mirrors almost precisely what the indigenous traditions said would happen if the...
It was called the Industrial Revolution, is what we call that period of time. But yeah, it didn't happen suddenly. It's been happening over thousands of years. It's just been getting faster and faster and faster. And there are, every now and then there's some innovation that comes along that causes it to accelerate exponentially more. And the Industrial Revolution was one of those circumstances. Again, no need for a giant cover-up.
Elders were cut. Rivers that appeared in earlier travel accounts as wide, navigable, and reliable become erratic within decades. Springs documented by 17th century expedition writers as permanent features of the landscape simply vanish from 18th century records. Climates described by traders and diplomats as mild and agriculturally productive become harsh, unpredictable, and hostile to settlement. Soils that sustain dense and organized populations for generations become thin, dry, and unreliable.
None of this is false. But again, no need for a cover-up.
The land without the giants becomes a different land entirely. Not deforested in the way that deforested land normally looks. Not simply cleared and exposed, but fundamentally altered. As if the biological infrastructure that maintained its character has been removed at the root level.
Yes, that's true. These things are true. Still don't need a conspiracy.
The indigenous people warned that this would happen. Their warnings appear in older records, translated imperfectly by scribes who did not understand the ecological framework behind what they were hearing, fragmented by the same archival disruptions that erase so much else from this period. But the core of the warning survives. Cut the elders and the land forgets what it was. That is not a metaphor, that is a systems description. And the environmental data from the region in the centuries following the disappearance of the great forests matches that description with a precision that should be far more troubling to mainstream historians than it currently is. So who cut them down? This is where we have to be careful, because the honest answer is that we do not have a named organization, assigned...
There's no organization needed. It's just humans expanding, industrialization. That's all you need. There doesn't need to be a single entity. It was a competing industrial expansion, right? Capitalism.
Mandate, a board of directors for the destruction of the Tartarian megaflora. What we have is a pattern. And patterns, when they are consistent enough across enough independent sources, across enough time and geography, become something that demands explanation. The logging operations described in scattered accounts from the Tartarian territories do not resemble any commercial timber operation on record from the same period. They share a set of characteristics that appear again and again.
What are you talking about? You keep making these claims without any kind of citations, though.
Regardless of which region or which century the account comes from. First, they targeted the oldest trees first. Not the young growth, not the accessible edge timber that any rational commercial operation would begin with.
No, the rational timber operation wants the biggest yield for the least amount of labor. So cutting down one tree that's going to produce hundreds of tons of timber versus having to cut down, 18 trees to get the same amount of timber. It's just economics.
The deepest, oldest, largest specimens, the ones that would have required the most extraordinary effort to reach and to fell. Second, they left no commercial trace, no ledgers, no company records, no destination manifests for the timber supposedly harvested. Legitimate commercial ventures in this period generated extensive paper trails because they had investors to answer to, governments to pay duties to, buyers who needed documentation. These operations generated nothing of that kind.
Yeah, it was easy to skirt around those requirements when you're out on the freaking frontier, buddy. Who do they have to answer to? Washington, 2,000 miles away, which is what, 4 months by horse and buggy.
Third, and this is the detail that stays with you, the stumps were destroyed, not left as remnants, not repurposed as foundations or landmarks, but burned or buried with a thoroughness that goes far beyond any ordinary land clearance practice. A stump of extraordinary size is not an obstacle. It does not impede farming. It does not
It does impede farming. That's the number one people who are trying to remove stumps are farmers. And stumps can damage when they start to decay and you can't see them anymore. They can cause damage to the blades on your plows. Obviously, they stand in the way of any kind of construction. And just maintenance in general, just mowing a stump is an obstacle in the way. So, yeah, there's got a lot of good reasons to get rid of them.
A road. Left standing, it becomes a landmark.
Also, they're going to decay eventually, so they're a big organic rotting mass on your property.
A curiosity, a monument that attracts travelers and generates stories and keeps alive in the living landscape. A memory
But they decay.
of what once stood there. Burning a stump is not practical. Burning a stump of this scale is extraordinarily labor intensive. The only reason to do it is to remove the evidence. Now we have...
Or to remove the stump, which is in the way of maybe a road going through, a railroad going through, a neighborhood going in, tract of farmland being expanded.
To ask what kind of authority could organize an operation of this scale, because the geographical scope of what the records describe is not a regional clearance.
Just unregulated capitalism.
It spans thousands of miles. It operates across territories controlled by different powers, different administrative systems, different languages, and different legal frameworks.
Yes, it's unregulated capitalism with everybody competing to deplete the resources before somebody else gets there first.
It sustains itself over not years, but decades, maintaining consistent priorities and consistent methods across distances that would challenge any modern logistics network.
Simply Secular Dave says, wait, 1,000-pound lump of well-anchored wood at ground level can damage farm equipment, right? A large stump just takes up space in a field that could be planted with crops.
Some researchers working at the intersection of alternative history and
And
institutional
stumps are dead. It's like leaving a corpse laying there.
analysis have pointed toward the major reorganizing powers of the 18th century as the most likely candidates. The period between roughly 1700 and 1800 was one of the most intensive episodes of imperial expansion, administrative centralization, and deliberate...
You're so close. You're so close right now. Yes. Keep going.
Cultural erasure in recorded history. Empires were not simply conquering territory in this period. They were reorganizing it, replacing local administrative systems with centralized ones, replacing local histories with official ones, replacing local knowledge systems with approved scientific frameworks. The great encyclopedic projects...
No. You fall right off the rails as soon as you start going down the right direction.
...of the 18th century, the ones that gave us the intellectual architecture of the modern world, were not neutral compilations of existing knowledge. They were editorial projects, decisions about what counted as knowledge, what counted as history, what counted as real. A forest of trees, whose scale contradicted the emerging scientific consensus about what plant life was capable of, would have been an extremely inconvenient...
I think that Ben has a complaints department in the Worldwide Weirdos Discord server. You can submit a complaint there.
...thing to have standing in the landscape, not simply because it was evidence of a different world, but because it was evidence that the new frameworks being built to explain the world were inadequate, that the categories being established for what was possible and what was not were wrong in ways that the trees made impossible to ignore. The giants were not just trees, they were a standing refutation of a worldview that was in the process of being installed as the only legitimate one. There is a detail in certain Central Asian historical surveys from the 19th century that does not receive the attention it deserves. Geological assessments of regions that were described as heavily forested in 17th century records consistently note an anomaly in the soil composition, layers of organic material at depths that do not correspond to the surface level vegetation, carbon signatures in the earth that suggest biological activity on a scale far beyond what the landscape at the time of survey would have produced.
All right, so we're going to have to wrap up here, but yes, so there is a conspiracy that these lumber operations in the industrial era were part of some cover-up to hide the existence of giant trees from us as part of the cover-up for the Tartarian Empire's erasure. Now, it's a conspiracy, obviously, but most of the stuff he said about the giant trees and the destruction they suffered during this period is absolutely true. And it doesn't need a conspiracy. It doesn't need a cover-up. It doesn't need secret agencies working together across, countries and languages or whatever he said. It doesn't need that. It just needs capitalism. That's all it needs. If lumber has value and lots of lumber has lots of value, then getting a tree that has lots of lumber and chopping it down is just logical. All right, but if you disagree with me, tell me in the comments down below. I would love to hear your thoughts on what the system with Tartaria is and what happened to all these trees. And yeah, go ahead, hit me up. I love to argue with people in my comment section. So if you wanna throw hands, we can do it, metaphorically speaking, of course. All right, please remember to be kind, take care, and we'll see you next time. All right, don't go anywhere. Stay right here in the hive, and we will teleport you all over to Dr. Ben's stream, which is starting in like 3 minutes. So there's going to be a little intermission. I want everybody to go run to the bathroom or get their drink or whatever, and then come back and just when you see we're in Dr. Ben's stream, you just say Hive Raid. You say Hive Raid to let him know we're here. Okay? All right. So I'm going to go do my intermission stuff, and I'll be in that chat too. So I'll see you guys in the side chat. Be kind. Take care. Yeah. We'll see you next time.
If it takes forever